Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, February 3rd, 2022. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, investigative journalist for Bloomberg Business Week, Peter Robison, author of Flying Blind, the 737 MAX tragedy, and the fall of Boeing. Meanwhile, Senator Ben Ray Lujan, who had a stroke and just underwent brain surgery, is expected back in the Senate in 4 to 6 weeks. And in that period, Senate Democrats won't have their majority, so just a reminder of how tenuous this all is. The Biden administration is deploying 3,000 more troops to Eastern Europe, NATO's eastern flank. And the reminder that Ukraine is not in NATO, but the U.S. likes to use their potential membership, which won't ever happen, as a tool of antagonism. Labor groups have come out against Jim Clyburn's pick for Breyer's replacement, J. Michelle Childs. I think this public rebuke makes it a lot harder for Biden to nominate her, which is good. The leader of ISIS has been assassinated, apparently, by the U.S. in northern Syria, and that changes very little. But their air raid also reportedly killed 13 civilians, including 6 children, according to the Syria Civil Defense. So a new ISIS leader will emerge, but those civilians will still be dead. Thousands of Afghans are seeking refuge in Iran and Pakistan daily as the country's economy collapses under Taliban rule. Estimates show that over 1 million could be fleeing the country. Today marks the 60th year anniversary of JFK implementing a full U.S. embargo on Cuba, which Obama attempted to roll back a bit and then Trump strengthened. It's accomplished nothing but misery. These are some positive headlines today. And lastly, doesn't get better here, at least 60 have been killed in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Africa's second largest nation, after an attack by militant groups on a camp for displaced peoples. Around 5.6 million remain displaced in Congo as of the end of last year. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Sam is out today, but it's Thursday, so we have a great and potentially even better show for you. Sorry to be all doom and gloom with those headlines, but I mean, putting the suffering of human beings outside of our country into context is very important. And sometimes it can slip our minds when we get a little bit too invested in U.S. politics. I mentioned that drone strike, or the air raid, I should say. And Bradley, if you could just pull that up. There are differing reports coming out right now about how those 13 plus potentially civilians died. The U.S. military is essentially saying that there were explosives that were accidentally detonated that didn't have anything to do really with their air raid. I find that claim to be quite dubious. Specifically,
well, we know the credibility of the U.S. military.
I mean, in a few months it'll come out, most likely, that maybe those claims aren't necessarily true. There have been reporters on the ground that have spoken to people in northern Syria who were affected by this. Bradley, if you could pull up that account that you showed me earlier from one of the civilians. So this reporter, Joe Dyke, spoke with one of the people who witnessed this air raid. The planes came around 1 a.m. There was a first, second, and third floor. They were shouting that we needed to get out of the house, men, women, and children, and that we would be killed if not. They fired a missile/shell while we were inside. Then they fired bullets, and we were inside. Then my husband went out and my son. They said, get away from the house and lie down on the ground. I came out behind them, but I didn't see them on the ground. They said, put your hands up on your head and get on the ground and take off your hijab. I was very scared. I couldn't tolerate it. Then they took my children and get inside. Then I took my children and get inside. They say, you will die, you will die. Then they threw a missile inside, a second one. My husband said they want to destroy the house. Let them. Don't move. I went out. They took the kids from me directly, and they searched me and handcuffed my hands behind me. They took me over there under the tree. There's a second part here. The neighbors were there as well. They hit my husband and hit my hair. Honestly, the neighbors don't know each other. I only know Abu Ahmad's family. The interviewer asked when they were shouting to you with loudspeakers, did they mention a name? No. Then the planes above us started to hit the top floor with machine guns, meaning that the man couldn't go down to get out. He couldn't get out, or his children. And the person who being interviewed said, I saw the remnants of bodies after they hit it, and his son died. He still had 2 daughters and a 15-day-old son. The father and mother and brother were killed, and the kids, survived kids, are a girl around 11 years old, a girl 7 years old, a boy 4 years old, and a 15-year-old boy were taken out. So, as Joe Dyke says in that thread, Biden is going to speak about this raid any minute now. It might actually already be happening, and he's going to claim enormous victory. But a reminder that a new, as I said, a new leader of ISIS will emerge, and these people will still be dead. And that's the reality of what the United States and the Pentagon claim are our victories in this war on terror. But let's also turn to the way that the Pentagon has responded to the Amnesty International report about Israel. So Amnesty International is the latest human rights organization to call Israel an apartheid state. It's important because Amnesty International is probably the world's largest human rights organization in the world. I believe that Human Rights Watch has already declared Israel to be an apartheid state. I think anybody with eyes and who has an understanding of what's happening there believes that that is the case. It's been 54 years of occupation. Palestinians have tiered ID cards while Israelis can move freely. Palestinians cannot participate in these elections that affect their lives. Israelis can do so freely. Israel can revoke the residency status of Palestinians at whim and without any real recourse. There are a variety of clear indicators of apartheid, let alone the fact that the ports are controlled by Israel. The water supply is immensely tainted in the occupied Palestinian territory. Clean water is very hard to get. Palestinians are killed in these conflicts at a disproportionate rate. We could go on and on, but here is this reporter, the AP's Matt Lee, who has gotten into scuffles with Ned Price before. He asks Ned Price here how they can use the Amnesty International reports in other instances as a way to bolster their claims about human rights abuses, but then ignore and take no issue with the report on Israel here. And Ned Price does not appreciate this question, but I very much do.
Of outside reports, but you certainly cite them quite a bit in your own human rights report. And I went back and looked, and in terms of just the last human rights report cited Amnesty International on Ethiopia, on Cuba, on China and Xinjiang, on Iran, on Burma, on Syria, on Cuba, and those references are endorsements of what this group, Amnesty, and then other groups as well that are cited have found. Why is it that, without taking a stand or making a judgment about the findings of this particular report, why is it that all criticism of Israel from these groups is almost always rejected by the U.S. and yet accepted, welcomed, and endorsed when it comes out when the criticism is of other countries, notably countries with which you have significant policy differences.
Matt, I would make a couple points. Number one, when we include a footnote in something like
these aren't footnotes, Ned. These are when we cite,
yes. Which it's a game of semantics, I suppose, but whether you call it a citation or a footnote.
Well, when it says in the report, Amnesty International found this X in Xinjiang with the Uyghurs, and we determine that we think that it's a genocide, and you guys come out and cite that and say, well, we also agree that it's a genocide.
That is a far cry, Matt, from saying that we have a comprehensive agreement with a third-party report that was produced by an outside group.
So it's just when it's criticism of Israel that you feel free to disagree?
Let's go.
Have you ever disagreed with an Amnesty report or a human rights report on a country such as Iran?
This is not, Matt, this is not about any outside group. This is about our vehement disagreement with a certain finding in a report by an outside group. Okay. There are plenty of times where we cite, as you said, outside groups in our own reports. We cite the facts that they have uncovered, that they have put forward. But I don't think you're going to find any citation in any State Department document. And I don't think I'll regret saying this, it says the department agrees on a comprehensive basis with absolutely everything that's in this report.
Yeah, another.
Can I just, sorry to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like he's acting as if there's like it's like a small thing in like the report. The main.
Calls it a footnote.
Yeah, it's the finding of the report with that Israel is an apartheid state, which has been recognized by more and more groups, frankly, and like that's not some minor thing that you can have a disagreement with. Like, why do you have such a vehement disagreement with it? It's because you are on the hook for them with like in imperial alignments.
Yeah, I have the report right here. It's multiple pages. It's not a footnote. It's not a footnote. And here it says, a system of apartheid is an institutionalized regime of oppression and domination by one racial group over another. It is a serious human rights violation which is prohibited in public international law. Amnesty International's extensive research and legal analysis carried out in consultation with external experts demonstrates that Israel enforces such a system against Palestinians through laws, policies, and practices which ensure their prolonged cruel discriminatory treatment. That is the facts of the ground. That's not a footnote, right? He's, I mean, I know he's just talking about his own report, I believe there, but
he's trying to minimize it.
It's semantics. Yeah. He's trying to minimize it as well. Where Amnesty International held a press conference, this should have been done a long time ago, but they put the weight of their credibility behind this accusation, and the fact that Amnesty International has this built-up international credibility. The United States is happy to use that to their own imperial ends, to bolster their claims against China because they want to create this Cold War kind of dynamic with China in order to create more competition, which gives more money to industry, specifically defense contractors in some areas as well. So that serves their interests. But calling into question the U.S. funding of Israel and the apartheid and the squalor that we create and the systems of oppression that we continue to uphold internationally while we clutch our pearls about what's happening in other countries. I mean, let alone our funding for Saudi Arabia, which is currently committing massive human rights violations in Yemen, as well as domestically in their own country. We're happy to use Amnesty International's credibility for our own purposes. But, the reporter here was calling out that obvious hypocrisy, and Ned Price has no good answer for it.
It shows why the State Department is not a good vehicle to join with people in these concerns, because they don't share them. It's just a warrant for them to do what they want to do in certain places. So yeah, like people get upset about certain areas. Like this, fine, we'll keep this lesson. And every time the State Department draws out something, like I think there should be skepticism towards it, frankly.
Yeah, never take what the government, especially dominant imperial governments, say seriously. I mean, that is the great rule of thumb. Unless it is backed up by activists and facts on the ground, often, I mean, it's the same thing when, by the way, every news outlet takes Israel's claims about the Iron Dome at face value. The fact that it stops 90% of Hamas's rockets. That is just the Israel Defense Department. I don't even remember exactly what it's called, but that is the Israeli government saying those statistics and repeated by every news source out there. There's no that is a way to uphold the Iron Dome funding and in fact increase it and get U.S. officials to increase Iron Dome funding, which has now just happened, even though there is very little understanding of the efficacy, because the efficacy of Palestinians' rockets are it's pretty much zilch. They randomly go different places. And so then it also muddies the waters, and it pretends like there's a false equivalency between this power dynamic. Just to bring it back to this Amnesty International report, is not a one side versus another side. It is a system of domination and repression. And that is always how it has to be framed.
And the Amnesty International report is not radical. It literally, I think, goes as far as saying we're not taking a position on the occupation. We're just trying to, use words correctly, and apartheid fits.
Well, they have, exactly. And they have other constituencies that they want to appease, which is why it took them so long to do this in the first place. But the fact that they did so, given their size, should show how obvious this is. All right, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be joined by the author of Flying Blind, the 737 MAX Tragedy and the Fall of Boeing, Peter Robison. We are back, and we are joined by investigative journalist for Bloomberg Business Week, Peter Robison. I apologize for mispronouncing your name earlier in the program. Author of Flying Blind, the 737 MAX Tragedy and the Fall of Boeing. Thanks so much for being here, Peter.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I loved your book, and I honestly, the Boeing post-crash propaganda campaign has kind of worked, because I realized in, reading some of what you wrote that I had largely forgotten about these twin crashes during a 6-month period a few years ago. So if you could remind, and we can start there, our audience a little bit about these two crashes of these Boeing 737 jets, and I guess then we can work backwards, talk about the history of Boeing, as well as its merger and why that led to some of these oversights.
Sure. It is, as you say, people have in some ways forgotten about these two crashes, which I think is partly just because of our need for a reliable air traffic system. People desperately want Boeing to be safe and reliable. So it's hard to imagine that it isn't. But the reason I wanted to write this book, and the reason why I think it's still important for people to think about, is that Boeing's behavior after the first crash was extremely unethical by its own standards. The airlines at American Airlines, one of the largest airlines in the world, were telling Boeing that they had hidden a dangerous piece of software that had the power to take the control of one of the most widely flown planes in the world from the hands of pilots. And Boeing, was set to its mission of keeping the MAX flying, of blaming what happened on pilots, and continued to push this narrative that it was the pilot's fault. Even went to Congress and told Congress people that it was the pilot's fault. And in Ethiopia, the pilot tried to follow the new checklist Boeing had designed. And again, the software took the plane out of his hands and another plane crashed. And that's when Boeing's story fell apart.
It reminds me a little bit of how when Wells Fargo was opening up all of those accounts for and pushing all of those separate accounts to be created in order to inflate their stock prices, how they blamed it on the middle bank managers for issuing or for following through on the directive from corporate, which was create as many accounts for as many people as possible, and that means that our stock price is going to go up. I mean, that it seems to me that was Boeing's strategy as well. Let it fall on the individual pilots. Don't look up. Don't look at our corporate culture and what we created here. That's a really interesting parallel. And you saw that with the pilots on the ground at Boeing who were asked to carry out what the management called the program directive. And the program directive was that the new plane, the MAX, when Boeing designed it, shall handle the same as the other plane and therefore shall not require additional training, by the airlines, which would be expensive. And Boeing had promised one of the biggest customers, Southwest, that it would pay them $1 million a plane if it did need additional simulator training. So pilots on the ground reacted as you would expect them to. They downplayed any idea that pilots needed additional training, that this was a new feature that required flagging to pilots. And then the executives responded in much the way, in the example of you highlighted with Wells Fargo, they blamed it on people beneath them. So let's, I guess, start with the history then of Boeing a little bit, because I think it shifts clearly with the 1997 merger, but first it has to build up all of this like credibility and cachet in the United States and also just in industry. It became immensely important in the post-World War II America. So talk a little bit about the history of the company, if you could. Like, I wasn't even aware that Boeing is the manufacturer of Air Force One, for example. Yeah, and that's with the 747, which is still considered one of the most iconic planes ever made. So I started covering Boeing in the late 90s at the period of this merger with McDonnell Douglas, when the culture did shift. But before that, it was considered one of the greatest American companies, certainly one of the greatest manufacturers. It had almost single-handedly created the jet age by taking risks, by investing in products like the 707, which was the first successful commercial jetliner, and it did that by focusing on manufacturing, by focusing on product, by putting engineers first in the culture. There was a saying in the 60s at Boeing that we hire engineers and other people, and the designer of the 747, Joe Sutter, had great sway throughout the company for much of that history. But then what I saw when I started covering Boeing in the late 90s was this shift in culture, and it was because Boeing had decided to imitate the corporate model that was then being promoted by Jack Welch, the standard corporate playbook of putting shareholders first. And that shift happens with this merger with McDonnell Douglas, which was famous for cost cutting, and basically they seem to adopt a lot of their policies. Talk a little bit about how that merger with that company specifically, and Harry Stonecipher, their CEO, how that affected the company. And I mean, it appears to me that you can kind of get away with some of these anti-worker, cost-cutting, anti-safety measures on a smaller scale, but when it happens at a company like Boeing, when this merger happens, that's when it becomes really catastrophic. Yeah, it is a combination of things, as you're saying. It starts with people. Harry Stonecipher worked for Jack Welch at GE for years, and he imbibed, the mentality of it's a business, not an engineering company. Ultimately, what matters is to make money for shareholders. And Boeing's incentives. One example is that Boeing's incentives started to change. I noticed in proxy statements
that they talked a lot about customer service and safety in the late 90s. And then by about 2007, the focus was on cost containment and efficiency. And managers were rated, based on how well they contained costs. And when the MAX was developed, the Boeing sent a presentation to the board that was headlined, stingy with a purpose. And they congratulated themselves on how much money they weren't spending at almost every step of the way.
So talk a little bit more, if you could, about the dynamic of, the dominance of shareholder value as the number one priority in corporate culture, specifically gaining traction in the 90s. To me, it's very much a function of late stage capitalism and neoliberal policies that have allowed for this. But when you have a company that has its customer's life in its hands, like Boeing, you see some of the more deadly consequences of shareholder value above all.
Yeah, and another thing that happened right at that period of the merger in 1997 was the corporate roundtable. The lobbyists for the biggest companies like Boeing and Wells Fargo put out a statement that said that the company's first duty is to shareholders and shareholders alone. And it was, it was almost uncontroversial at the time, because it was a time when GE was soaring and its profits were going up 50% a year. Its stock price was going up 50%. It seemed to be that the late stage capitalist model, people didn't talk about it as late stage then, they just thought this was the way it should be. It seemed that this late stage model was the way to run a company. And Jack Welch at GE was hollowing out the manufacturing base. He was focusing on services, not product. He was, he had this rapid fix it, close it, or sell it mentality. There wasn't patience in investing. And over time, it's become clear what the drawbacks of that are. And even in 2019, the corporate roundtable corrected its previous statement, or issued a new statement, and said that companies owe a duty to communities, to employees, and to customers as well as shareholders.
So then I guess we can move into the post-1997 Boeing era, and how the company grew in its relationship even with the government as well. Take us to that period, and how, if you could expand a little bit on how things began to shift.
Yeah, there was a parallel shift that was happening in government as well, and it's one that I describe in the book, through the eyes of these specialists at the FAA who were seeing these changes on the ground. And starting in the 90s, you had Republican leaders who were committed to reducing the size of government, and that was mingling with this, triangulating desire of the Clinton administration to reinvent government. So starting in the late 90s. There were attempts to run the FAA more like a business, and to reward managers based on their success in meeting the needs of stakeholders. And the stakeholder is the manufacturer, it's the airline, and it steadily moved more toward self-regulation. By 2005, the FAA had handed over much more authority over the certification of new planes directly to Boeing. And it used to be that the FAA appointed these deputies at Boeing who certify that each aspect of the plane is safe. And in 2005, the job of picking these deputies went to Boeing, and the FAA would have this sort of vague oversight role. And the specialists I talked to at the FAA said what happened is that their own managers started working together with Boeing managers to get planes out on time, to meet deadlines, and they couldn't get their points listened to.
When you say it out loud, it sounds, I know that this is like kind of common practice. We see this under many Republican administrations, specifically like the EPA. Okay, why don't you self-regulate coal plant? But for something like airplanes, where we've become almost numb to the fact that these planes are flying us through the air at rapid speeds, and any minor issue, if it results in a crash, hundreds of people die. I mean, what was that process like of the FAA basically saying, or developing these relationships, or maybe even coming from the industries that they're supposed to regulate, and making these decisions, which in my opinion probably should be illegal, that these companies should self-regulate? And how'd that look, I guess?
Yeah, it's really relying on the industry's record of safety over time, and that was almost taken for granted. And the head of the office who oversaw Boeing, named Ali Barami, would tell specialists that, it's okay, Boeing knows the rules, Boeing can handle it. There was this deep trust in Boeing having this enlightened self-interest to protect it itself. And Barami later, got a job at the industry lobbyist making $300,000 a year. So there's a lot of belief in enlightened self-interest, in enlightened self-interest, but it comes across often as simply self-interest.
Would you say that it's a coincidence that Boeing was also at this point developing weapons and like working with the Defense Department on other projects outside of commercial airlines?
It was becoming a huge player in Washington. I talked to one executive who was marveling at the size of the lobbying shop. This person had been along with Boeing all through the rise from it being a Seattle aircraft builder to now suddenly being, after the acquisition of McDonnell Douglas and other companies, being this massive defense contractor as well. And it's still the number 2 defense contractor. So that plays a role also, but Boeing often gets what it wants in Washington.
Right. It's depressing. I mean, I don't think people, people don't fully connect how unpleasant their flying experience is to government regulation. If the government wanted to, they could say the seats have to be this big. You can only have this number of people on airplanes. There can be some more protections for the customers on these airplanes. I know that's maybe a bit separate from the manufacturer. That's more with the airlines as well. But it seems to me like it wasn't just with the airplane manufacturers. Airlines were also getting the kid glove treatment from the government during this time period too.
Yeah, and those are things that perhaps in times past would have been considered unremarkable for the government to have a say in those things. But this idea that we should leave it to corporations, that their profit and their position in the industry can't be tampered with, partly because we're in a global race against other economies. That message is just transcendent right now. So it's hard to see how the government would have a role as small as that at this point.
Right. Okay, so then I guess we can move into some of the defects and the manufacturing issues with Boeing's planes. Despite the FAA clearly developing some sort of cozy relationship with Boeing, they still did cite Boeing as for some safety violations in the 21st century. That was 20 safety violations. So that means that they were obviously cutting corners even past the low standard that the FAA was holding them to. Can you talk a little bit about this new era of Boeing airplane and kind of some of the stories that you wrote about in your book of pilots having issues, planes not meeting these safety requirements, and how things turn there?
Yeah, I tried in many cases to compare, the number of safety violations Boeing had compared to Airbus, because at this point they are pretty much the same size, although Airbus now has 2/3 of the narrow body market and Boeing has 1/3. It's completely reversed from 20 years ago. But that number of safety violations, compares with a handful at Airbus. And there were moments where, I talked to specialists at the FAA who wanted to get additional safety measures put on the MAX. One was surge protectors and circuit breakers on the fuel tanks on the MAX. And one specialist I talked to was told by his manager that no, what Boeing had was enough to meet regulations. He didn't agree, but he noticed that on the Airbus plane, that the competing Airbus plane, that change was required to be made. And again, it emphasizes this cozy relationship and the way they were working together to get the planes out the door, not hold the manufacturer's feet to the fire and make sure it's safe.
And so would you draw that discrepancy to Boeing's lobbying efforts as opposed to a company like Airbus?
That certainly plays a role. And I think it's also reflecting the shift in the corporate culture. It's no coincidence that not just the MAX, but virtually every big Boeing program has had problems. The Air Force has been deeply critical of quality issues with the refueling tankers Boeing built for it. The 787 has been largely grounded for the past year because of manufacturing defects. Some of this is coming out because the FAA, does feel emboldened in some ways since the MAX crashes, but it's also showing that this is a company with deep problems, and that has come from devaluing engineers, and it needs to sort those problems out.
So devaluing engineers, do you mind explaining to the audience what that looks like in contrast with past or best practices?
Yeah, I mean, the broadest example would be, maybe one that I describe in the book, which is that after a crash of the 747 in 1985 in Japan, Boeing almost immediately took responsibility for it and said this was the result of a faulty repair job on our own factories, and that touched off an effort over years to look more closely at quality by the customers. But Boeing designed a plane called the 777 in the 90s that's still considered one of the safest ever to fly. It had a culture called, sort of self-consciously created this slogan, working together. And the idea was that Boeing would work together with customers, with suppliers, with employees. There would be communication, people would listen. And that plane debuted in 95, which was shortly before this big shift in culture we talked about. And since then, the engineers, talk at Boeing talk about not being listened to. And that came out even after the first crash of the MAX in 2018. Dennis Muhlenberg, the CEO, didn't even give a hearing to the idea of the pilots. He told one of his executives that these union pilots simply wanted to make more money to fly the plane. So things were responded to with ideology, not with a belief in the ground truth of the engineers.
And did you see this coinciding, this new attitude with a more aggressive anti-union push as well?
Yeah, they're even in the unit that developed the manual, which was found to be insufficient for the MAX, had been riven by these fights over unionization, and Boeing had taken the simulators in this unit and moved them to Miami, which people there felt was a direct response to their unionization efforts. And so at the time there was fragmentation in people's jobs. Instead of walking a few floors to the simulator to chat with someone about a new procedure, they had to call someone in a hotel room in Miami, where there were increasingly contractors who weren't getting the same messages at times. There were problems with miscommunications. That Boeing called them purchase service pilots, or PSPs, and the longtime pilots called them DBCs, which was short for dirtbag contractors. So that gives you a sense of the hallway conversations at Boeing.
Right, and I mean, I just that can't even be efficient. But like, I guess it appears like you're cost cutting. And another thing you wrote about, which was not shocking to me, but of course depressing, was the amount of billions in stock buybacks that were given to these executives, as opposed to going towards improving the technology of these planes despite these issues. talk a little bit about how expansive and how large those buybacks were.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a big part of the Welch legacy. And buybacks always sound arcane. They always seem ephemeral to people. It's hard to grasp what it's doing, but what it's really doing is diverting the cash of the company, directly to shareholders, and especially to the executives at the top, who are compensated in large part in stock. And GE in the 90s started sending half of its cash to shareholders in the form of dividends and buybacks. At Boeing, while the MAX was being developed, that hit 80%, and over 5 years, it was $40 billion. So, and that's money that, Boeing was budgeting $2.5 billion for the MAX. It could have developed a couple of new planes with that amount of money.
And so I guess that brings us to the aftermath of these crashes, and the amount of compensation that was, or not compensation, I should say, but the settlements that were reached with some of the victims of these crashes, and also the United States government's response. Take us through that, if you could.
Yeah, the final penalty in this deferred prosecution agreement that the government reached was a headline figure of $2.5 billion, which people I talked to thought was very unusual, that the Justice Department was putting this headline figure on the settlement, because it included money that Boeing, about $1.8 billion that Boeing was going to hand to customers as compensation for their losses. That's money that Boeing was required in the settlement to pay, but it was likely going to pay that anyway. It was also in negotiations at the time with families. It was ordered to pay them another $500 million, but that that's split over hundreds of people. So and the final piece of the settlement was $243 million. The actual cash part was $243 million, which the government said was the amount Boeing saved by not requiring simulator training, which gives you an idea of what what could have been avoided if the right thing had been done in the first place, and what the real stakes were if people had stopped to think about what they were doing. So ultimately, it's an agreement that lets Boeing go on doing what it's doing. The only criminal action is against a mid-ranking pilot, and the families are, deeply, many of the families are deeply upset about how this was handled, and they asked for a meeting with, the new Attorney General Merrick Garland to say that their views weren't heard on this settlement.
And let's also be clear too that Boeing also received billions of dollars in bailout money in the pandemic. I mean, what was that final figure, and especially in comparison to what was paid out to these victims?
Well, it's the airlines, its customers got bailout money in the pandemic. Boeing, the timing may be unrelated, but Boeing was given, hundreds of billions of dollars in relief payments from the Air Force over these delays on the tanker, which was, relief ultimately. And Boeing was able to raise debt very cheaply from investors. So, just going back to what you were saying at the start, it's the companies can do wrong, but they're still protected because of their huge role in the economy.
Yeah, I mean, and lastly, I guess you've been covering this company since 1997, you say, right? I mean, like, I guess I'm curious about your 30,000-foot perspective on where the airline industry is and where such a dominant player like Boeing is in terms of like its role, and if it's learned any lessons, and if there's any silver linings to some of the things that you researched.
Well, things move very slowly in the aircraft industry, so it's hard sometimes to see the forest for the trees. But when I started covering Boeing, it had 2/3 of the market. As I say, it was widely praised. It had a great reputation around the world. The FAA was the gold standard of regulation. And now Boeing has about third of the market. Airbus has the hotly, desired, narrow body plane. Its assembly lines are almost full. There are new aircraft makers in China and Russia that are trying to take a piece of the market. That's going to take a long time, but Boeing perhaps is looking like a smaller company that is having a harder time competing on the world stage, which is the story of American manufacturing ultimately.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I really appreciate your time today. Everyone can check out this book. It is entitled Flying Blind, The 737 MAX Tragedy and the Fall of Boeing. Peter Robison, also investigative journalist for Bloomberg Business Week and author of this book. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yep. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, come back, wrap up the first hour of the show. We are back. I wanted to touch on this story, and I know half the audience is going to be like, ugh, sports, but it's really not about that. For people who may be unaware, the Chicago, well, it is about sports, but it's more about owners and their inability to face the consequences of their actions or be challenged in any meaningful way. The Chicago Blackhawks NHL team, one of the original 6 NHL teams, considered one of the top franchises in the league, has been mired in a massive scandal in which one of their young players during their Stanley Cup run around, I believe, 10 years ago or a little bit, or 2010, was sexually assaulted very aggressively by a video assistant on staff. Kyle Beach was the victim's name. He was John Doe in a lawsuit for a while and came out and spoke incredibly powerfully to the media, told his story, talked graphically about this assault by this video assistant who was kept on with the organization after Kyle Beach complained because they didn't want to disrupt team chemistry in the middle of a Stanley Cup run, which they ended up winning. The idea that a video assistant would be protected, this isn't the head coach, not that that would be okay. This isn't the general manager. This isn't the owner. This guy was a video assistant who was also able to participate despite saying, okay, after this year, you have to leave. But he was kept on, participated in the team celebration after they won the Stanley Cup, then was let go, went and worked in other programs, including with other young boys, ended up getting convicted, I believe, of assaulting a minor at another point in his life. He's a convicted sex offender, and the Blackhawks helped cover it up. This is a massive, massive story, and yet the entire organization appears to be frustrated that the media is even deigning to ask them about this story. Here is a reporter from The Athletic, which was, I believe, recently acquired by the New York Times, Mark Lazarus. He's asking the chairman, Rocky Wirtz, who I believe is also the owner of the Blackhawks. Is that right, Bradley? Yes. He's the chairman. We're just double checking on that. Yes, he's the owner.
Yeah, he's the principal owner and chairperson of the team.
Look at how indignantly he responds and how outrageously he responds when there's just a question about the team's culpability in this really, really disgusting incident.
I know we're looking forward here, but I think we have to look back also. And I think much of what happened to Kyle Beach stemmed from a power imbalance between a coach and a player, and the powerlessness of a player in that situation. So what are the Blackhawks doing? What have the Blackhawks done? What will the Blackhawks do to empower a player in a similar situation to make sure that doesn't happen again?
I'm going to answer the question at the end. I think the report speaks for itself. The people that were involved are no longer here. We're not looking back at 2010. We're looking forward. And we're not going to talk about 2010. I know, and I'm not either. And we're not going to talk about what happened. We're moving forward. That is my answer. Now, what's your next question?
I can pick up to what we are doing today. And I think
no, I don't know. That's none of your business. That's none of your business. What we're going to do today is our business. I don't think it's any of your business.
How is it not my business?
Because I don't think it's any of your business. You don't work for the company. If someone in the company asks that question, we'll answer it. And I think you should get on to the next subject. We're not going to talk about Kyle Beach. We're not going to talk about anything that happened. Now we're moving on. What more do I have to say? You want to keep asking the same question? You hear the same answer? Okay, ask the next question. Okay, good.
He had to apologize after that because obviously that outburst was incredibly embarrassing, but the reporter nailed it. The Athletic reporter, when he said, you said enough right there. The guy's name is Mark Lazarus. This, again, it's a sports story, but it really is a corporate culture and capitalism story.
It's a capitalist story,
yeah.
An accountable capitalist.
Mm-hmm. This guy feels, I mean, team owners operate like oligarchs, and they feel like they are, I mean, we're seeing this also in the story of Brian Flores, where someone like Stephen Ross basically said to him in the NFL, you're going to tank and I'm going to pay you I'm going to pay you money to be bad at your job, and I'll probably throw you overboard in the end. And it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, you'll be fired because of the bad record.
Because you'll be fired because of the bad record. But I paid you to do what I want. I wanted you to be the worst team in the league. And you do it. And you'll be the fall guy. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to like represent something bigger than yourself and it's your entire career and you're a black coach and it's already hard for you to get opportunities. But you're going to do what I say because I'm a billionaire and I own this team. And like, this is the similar thing that we're seeing here there. Like, you are an outside reporter and you're going to ask me about what meaningful changes we've done in our organization to prevent sexual assault? You're not in the company. You're not a company guy. You're not getting paid by me. So you aren't able, you should not be able to ask me any tough questions. And the idea that anyone getting paid by him would be able to ask tough questions is laughable because of the instance that we talked about here. Because when Kyle Beach, who was, I believe, 19 at the time, I mean, he struggled. He talks about how he had substance abuse issues after this assault because no one in the team listened to him. He went to multiple people. And there was a meeting about it, and everyone decided to cover it up, to keep on a very ancillary coach to the team's success. The idea that anybody in the organization would have been able to go to that guy, that capitalist, that owner, and say, I really want to talk about the structural power dynamics within this organization, which we spoke about indigenous rights and the offensiveness of those mascots yesterday. Blackhawks, you're up next, by the way. The idea that anyone in that organization would be able to actually meaningfully say something to the powerful, it's laughable. I mean, and that he demonstrated that by the way that he spoke to that reporter.
Yeah, that's that sort of owner, that's who's coddled to it in this America. That's who's threatened by all the wokeness. That's like when Dave Rubin says like the wokes are coming for your boardrooms. That's what he's talking about. Like that's who's in his ear. That's who Dave Rubin thinks he's like representing basically. And I think it's coming up in so many different areas in sports, but also happening in entertainment a lot too. But the SI reporter, I forget his name, Mike Silver, I think.
Yeah.
When he said like there are racists in position of power, or people who are willing to cover up sexual assaults, or like just bad people in positions of power, and we need to stop tiptoeing around people like that.
Yep. So, good question by that reporter, though. I mean, anyway.
Yeah, and like the reporter said, he wasn't even asking about the past. He was saying, "What are you doing now and in the future?"
Right. Right. The answer is nothing. The answer is
I'm not talking about it with anybody unless you're part of the company. And if you are part of the company, I'll fire you. So you're not part of the company, so you can't.
But if anyone's in the company, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about it in a way that's like you're fired.
Yeah, right. All right, we are going to wrap up this first hour of the show and head into the fun half. Good mix in the first hour today. We talked about massive amounts of death in the countries that the United States has meddled in, then corporate malfeasance, and now sexual assault.
Yep, and military strikes too.
Yeah, it's just we had a potpourri of horribleness.
Binder and Brandon, if you want to join us, the link should be in your chat.
For now, what happened, Matt, on Left Reckoning last night?
We actually had Matt Binder on Left Reckoning to talk about his new show, Scam Economy. We had a big, long discussion about the new hit piece Spotify NFT thing that upset a lot of artists. Binder had a theory that it's the sort of thing where it's easier to say sorry than ask permission. And we also talked about Leonard Peltier and how Biden needs to free Leonard Peltier. And anybody who has looked over the legal circumstances as to why he spent 44 of his 77 years in prison will understand that it is just to send a message to activists that if you are an activist, you can get locked up too. And so Biden should do it. I hope he does do it. Like people like Danny DeVito have been. I
was about to say he tweeted out. You're right.
But if he doesn't do it, it will be because the lawless law enforcement community, FBI, Biden doesn't have the courage to cross them, and they'd rather have a guy spend his entire life in prison to send that message to folks who might want to protest things these days. So we talked about that, and also how the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It's nice that we're getting some money to bridges and stuff like that, particularly in the wake of the Pennsylvania bridge collapse. However, even the governor of Pennsylvania says the federal funds are not going to do enough to close the gap for infrastructure, even in Pennsylvania. So we're not doing nearly enough, and it was just a kick of the can down the road. And I mean, it's going to be interesting to see the Democrats try to run on the bipartisan infrastructure bill, because again, like I like that particularly the bridge repair, that's needed. We need, frankly, a lot more of it, and it can't be once in a lifetime, as Nancy Pelosi said, because that bridge in Pennsylvania was only 50 years old, and I don't know about you guys, but I want to live longer than 50 years. So anyway, patreon.com/leftreckoning to get all of that, and here is Binder himself.
Ooh. Very prompt. 1 o'clock on the nose. Or as Sam's other computer says, 12:55 or whatever. Hey, Matt, how are you? Yep. No audio.
Getting an audio issue, Matt.
Yep. Just go to your
settings. There we go.
There we go.
How are you guys?
Doing well. I mean, you're probably sick of Matt. Other new Matt already, huh?
Oh yeah, long time no see, Matt. Had fun last night on Left Reckoning. It was great.
Yeah, it was very, very fun.
Yeah, he just gave us a little bit of the lowdown. What's happening on Doomed and Scam Economy?
Right. Well, tonight is going to be another episode of Scam Economy. Doomed is taking a very, very short break. In fact, next week will be a very special episode of Doomed with a very special guest. I don't know if I can say it yet, so I'll wait. But a lot of you who watch this show will know him because he's on this show almost every day. But
that is that makes it pretty obvious.
Yeah, I mean, just making sure. Now, we already emailed back and forth. We're pretty sure we have the date down. It's definitely happening. Tonight, though, youtube.com/MattBinder, and then obviously as a podcast at scameconomy.com. We will once again be diving into the scam economy. This time we'll be specifically looking into more about how cryptocurrency in general is a Ponzi scheme and how stablecoins, specifically Tether, are basically enacting possibly the biggest market manipulation of all time. I had on Sohal Mortazavi, who wrote a great piece for The Jacobin, which really another, for the early episodes, it was really good because it really does a great job of breaking this down for the layperson who has no idea about cryptocurrency. And that's what I'm trying to do, at least early on here, because it could get confusing. That's not what this show is here to do. We're not going to confuse you. You'll get all you need to know and understand it all.
Amazing. All right. Well, I can't wait to check out the next episode of Scam Economy. Do we have Brandon?
No, we might need to do Brandon's plugs after the break.
Are we going to do our new fun half?
Oh, really quickly, can I just thank everybody for subscribing to the show and supporting it last week? Because of all of the Majority Report listeners, the show skyrocketed on the tech Apple podcast charts, and we were in the top 10 for a number of days. So I really wanted to thank you all for helping out there and supporting the new show.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Well, I'm so happy that it had a great launch. Very good stuff. But I guess we'll head into the fun half. The only reason I said that was we don't need to play the new one, but Bender might appreciate it.
It will be.
I saw it.
But Bender won't be able to see it this time.
All right. Well, 646-257-3920. I didn't even read that. I just remembered that. It might have been the first time. I don't remember phone numbers anymore. The only phone number I know by heart is my mother's.
Wait, is it 646-257-3920?
Yes.
Nice. Okay. Good.
There you go. So if I'm ever in a pinch, my emergency contact, my mom, she doesn't pick up, I'll call into this show. All right. See you in the fun half.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second. Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's...
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is it?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Libertarians. They're so stupid, though. Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering.
I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-35-501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
654 $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
Call it satire. Sam goes with satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just every day, all day, everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the week being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
What is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.
back now.
We are back. We are back, and we are joined by Brandon. Hello, Brandon. Let's go.
Let's go, Brandon. You know, the clarion call of desperate people.
Right. And where is Brandon going on the discourse?
Wow. So I posted an episode last week, like I said, and this week we'll be discussing, I guess, cancel culture and all of the various topics about, I don't know, the dissemination of information and propaganda in America, as well as the, you know, many issues that it pertains to, rather, the many issues that it presents for moving forward as a country. So yeah, I guess look forward for that this week and that joyful topic.
Interesting.
Wonderful.
We had a message from somebody from Delaware last night on the show, and they said they were from Brandonville, which I thought was a funny thing to call Delaware.
Brandonville, Brandenburg, a lot of great places and people named after me.
I mean, it's only fitting. Socialist Bear writes in, hey Matt, any comment on the news being reported today that 80% of all NFTs are owned by 3,200 people, about 10% of the market, aka the crypto whales, who are increasingly desperate for others to buy in because there isn't enough money in the system for the whales to cash out. I mean, that makes total sense, but...
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's especially obvious in the NFT world. Like crypto is probably, you know, if you throw some big numbers of people who have a little bit of crypto at me, I'm not gonna. That would sound very plausible to me because it's fairly easy, especially with Robinhood, to just go on there and throw a buck into Dogecoin or Bitcoin or whatever. But NFTs, you know, I don't know how anyone could think that there is a huge like gulf of people out there just salivating at the mouth for everything to be turned into NFTs so they could spend money on a receipt for something that they could view and have on their computer for free. So yeah, it's not surprising at all.
No, it's suckers suckering suckers is basically it. Or, you know, I guess the scammers scamming scammers is a way better way of putting it. But, you know, it's just obvious when you learn anything about crypto that it's just entirely a bubble. Like people have to want to buy the coins off you. You can't just like, despite the socks, you can't just like go buy coffee with them with, you know, like your shit coins.
Right.
Leach says, new fun half intro is great. Michael Tracy's delightful girlfriend. I live in Brandon, Manitoba for a few months. I did not realize it was named after Brandon Sutton. Well, the more you know, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's take a call.
I think it was originally called Pretty Bad Manitoba, but they had to change it because obviously.
Obviously. Calling from a 973 number. New Jersey represent.
Oh.
Who's this?
Hello. This is actually Kermit the Frog.
Oh, Kermit. How are you?
That was Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, I was about to say, sure, it's not Jordan Peterson.
Excuse me?
We thought you might be somebody else named Jordan Peterson, but what's up, Kermit?
Well, that's why I'm calling in.
Okay.
You know, this guy, he's running around, he stole my voice, and he's confusing absolutely everybody. Nobody knows who I am anymore. They just think, you know, I call anywhere, try to do something, they say, aren't you Jordan Peterson? And I say, absolutely not!
Well, I'm sorry for offending you. We've been hearing so much from him these days, and not too much from you, Kermit.
Well, you know, I mean, I don't have much of an option now because, you know, AT&T owns Sesame Street, and they don't give me much money anymore.
Yeah, I understand that.
Well, I just don't, you know, do you guys know anything I can do about this? Like, I don't know much about, you know, I know about frog law. I don't know much about people law. Can I, like, take this guy down?
I think what you got to do is call in and just say you are Jordan Peterson, that you're very sorry for all the things you said about trans people, and you overreacted, and it was a big overreaction. And actually, a lot of the people who encouraged you on that, you now condemn and say that they sort of you weren't well in your right mind, and now you've sort of got recuperated from the apple cider vinegar, and now you see the error of your ways. I think that's what you should do.
I think you should sue. I think you should sue for copyright infringement, and I think you should take him for everything he's worth, including, you know, his PhD, and you can become a, you know, doctor
You know what? I like
of
Brandon.
psychology.
I like Brandon.
Yeah?
Yeah, let's fuck him. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if we should physically do so, but I mean, in terms of his finances,
No, like, metaphorically.
Yes, Kermit. I mean, totally. Take him for all of he's worth. Just steal all of the stockpiles of meat in his freezer from under him.
Oh, Pinky would love that.
All right, Kermit.
All right, you guys have a great day. Bye!
Bye!
I have to say, a good Kermit. Usually people call into the show trying to do the Kermit Jordan Peterson voice, and it doesn't quite sound like it. But
it was a good Kermit.
This person had a really good Kermit voice. Yeah.
A+ Kermit.
Fierce Deity says, wow, pretty crazy that we simultaneously got a call from Jordan Peterson, Patrick Mahomes, Jarrett Cole, and Kermit. I don't know if you guys have heard Patrick Mahomes speak, but he sounds like Kermit. It's a little odd. It's hard to take him seriously, and then you realize how good he is. All right.
It's jarring how much Jordan Peterson sounds like Kermit. Like the first time you hear it, it's like, oh yeah, no, exactly like him.
Well, this person tried to get in yesterday, and we were having technical difficulties calling from a 308 number. Oh. Okay, I think that was Kowalski, and Kowalski just hung up, but I will take your call, Kowalski, because I know you were trying to get in yesterday. Calling from an 848 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 848. Going once. Going twice. Bye-bye. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Have you seen that Trump montage? It's a beautiful thing. Calling from a 646 number. 646?
Hey, is this me?
That's you.
Hello?
Hi.
Oh, hi. Hi, guys. I called a couple of weeks ago, actually, about the filibuster. I wanted to,
Who is this?
Oh, this is Aaron from St. Louis.
Aaron from St. Louis.
Yeah. So I want to talk about something pretty different, but still related to political stuff. So I'm an engineering student, senior in college, looking for jobs. Very stressful, still not getting any jobs. But I think it's just important to raise awareness to the fact that there's a lot of engineering students to military defense contractor pipeline in the United States. A lot of the jobs, a lot of the recruiting that happens at engineering schools, a lot of that goes to Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, all these companies that are just massive defense contractors. And it just sort of sucks because there's nothing you can do about it. And you look at job postings in Europe, and a lot of them are for renewable energy and for train development and public transit. And in here, it's well, if you're a genius, you can go to SpaceX, and otherwise you're going to a defense contractor. And a lot of that's just a product of there's so much money for development of bombers that that's where the jobs are. But also I have a question for you guys, and you might not have an answer, but do you think, as someone who I want the military budget to go significantly down, I don't want the U.S. military to be all over the world, is it moral or ethical for me to take a job in that field if that's the only place where I'm going to be able to get a job? Because I need to make money, and it sort of sucks, but what solutions do you think engineers that are on the left can do to try to affect change in this field?
Dude, I don't know. I mean, that's really hard. I'm very much in the camp of for the most part, people who are forced by the market into doing something that they otherwise wouldn't want to do. I can't really hold it against you. I think you just have to limit, maybe put a limit on yourself. If Lockheed Martin is posting, come build this bomber, I guess maybe you can say that it's not something you want to stick your nose into, and put some limits on yourself. As long as you have some standards, I think you're doing the best you can. But for the most part, it's just that's got to be an internal thing with you,
Yeah, I mean, my first thought is always okay, unionize. You always want to go and unionize, because that's always the best way to affect change as a worker. But it just still sort of I don't know, it just sort of feels shitty that like that's the type of work that I'm most likely going to be doing. But like I also don't have a choice, so it's sort of like a sucky situation. I mean, I don't know if there's like a right answer, but I do think like it's important for us to recognize that like beyond the moral issues, it's also just like so stupid that like instead of like pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into like just general like tech innovation or like, you know, renewable energy innovation, we're pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into like developing like bombers and like Apache helicopters and whatever that like really just don't help us at all.
Well, that's
so
why that engineer, I don't know if you heard, Aaron, that engineer that called in the other day that was basically saying the Green New Deal is stupid and not feasible because of the engineering capacity. I mean, how amazing would it be if we had that kind of investment and jobs for you, people who don't want to work in these fields? It would be a land rush.
Emma, when I was listening to that like debate with Sam, I was like hitting my head against the wall. Like it was like such a like classic. I'm an engineer. I know better than everyone else. Like it's just so annoying. Like I mean, he also was just like wrong. Like he was saying that essentially that like, oh, we can't actually be carbon neutral with the level of like production of concrete and all this other stuff because it's naturally going to produce CO2 emissions. And like that is true, but 60+% of our CO2 emissions come from either transportation or power generation, both of which could very easily be done carbon neutral. There is like about like 10% that comes from like concrete and like and from like you know, steel and whatever, but like a lot of that can be mitigated with carbon capture. And also like if we can cut 90% of our carbon emissions, but we still keep like 10% for like making concrete, that's like fine. Like that's we're gonna be fine. Like that, you know, especially if we like replant like a lot of the deforestation that's happened. Like that's not the issue. That's not like the main thing. And just this idea that like we can't maintain a planet of like 8 billion people without, you know, like it's just ridiculous. It's just very stupid.
Well, it's a classic thing where, you know, you set up a straw man of if this large goal cannot be achieved, it's not even worth trying. And that's a frustrating thing that I think we encounter a lot in political conversations, all of us.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, thanks for taking my call. Really appreciate the show. Hopefully I'll get in on the phone lines when Sam's there. But a big fan of Matt and Brandon, so still great to talk to you guys.
You got a funny way of showing it, Aaron. You got a funny way of showing it. Have a good one. Bye.
Hey, let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon. And Matt.
Bye.
Sorta.
And Matt. Bye.
Yeah.
Damn, he ended up giving props to everyone but the person he actually spoke to on the phone.
You know, I gotta say, Aaron, I'm a little hurt. Gotta say. All right, let's do some clips. So Candace Owens, I guess we could start there. She had Dr. Robert Malone, who is the favorite of the Joe Rogan Experience, as the self-proclaimed inventor of mRNA. Everybody who seems to have worked on this vaccine technology has not embraced his perspective on this. What, Matt? Sorry, did you want to say?
Oh, I was just saying, yeah, he's patented some things and worked on some stuff, but the claims that he invented mRNA technology are ludicrous.
Ludicrous. Yeah. For some reason, they decided to talk about homeschooling in public schools because this guy's a quack and doesn't have
He's going to need something else to talk about.
Right. His mRNA inventor turned vaccine denialist. He has to expand his reach a little bit. So he's
let me just qualify, sorry, but he actually says, I got the Moderna vaccine and blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not anti-vax. He's anti-vax. He's basically a pandemic style quack that says this was all premeditated to control you. Like, so he's and this is the type of thing when Joe Rogan is touting his bona fides and how credible he is. They always like to say, like, hide behind, like, oh, maybe there might be some study that shows like some minor use for ivermectin and therefore Robert Malone is vindicated. No, that is very, very much not the full amount of the claims that this fucking lunatic has been making.
Yeah, and the COVID eventually will be moving past this, and so he has to kind of set up his next his next venture, his next grift.
The next way he's going to be useful to the right wing.
Exactly. And so here he is with Candace Owens talking about public schools.
Well, there was a quiet programming going on. You know, when I was growing up, the homeschooling kids are weird. And now I'm realizing that that was an intentional messaging that was sent down, and the same intentional messaging for women.
You know how they're weird? They can talk to adults.
They can talk to adults.
They haven't been run through this industrial assembly line model where they're herded with only their same age group. They have to interact with a diverse world of diverse ages and points of view.
Pause
you know
it.
what happens? They come out better.
Okay, so can I just make, is he saying that the public school experience, I just want to see if you guys heard the same thing as me, the public school experience, because they're all of the same age and they're in grades, that is an assembly line kind of sheeple experience as opposed to a homeschooling one where you're working with your parents, seemingly. And so that allows you to have a more diverse experience than, I don't know, working with people of different economic classes in your school, of different races, of different experiences. It seems to be the inverse, but he is claiming it's the opposite.
That is what he's saying. You got it. You nailed it.
Okay.
Out of my experience, you know, like you pay a social price for not going to public school, and that's like even considering Catholic school, for instance, let alone being homeschooled for part of that. Like people I know who homeschooled their kids for like the early grades realize that, oh, we need to send them to high school because like it's just not, you need that socialization. You're lacking severely in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I would agree with his assessment that, you know, our school system as it exists today, you know, based on the kind of de facto racial and economic segregation that exists, is not very good at integrating people into the kind of environment where they would learn more empathy theoretically from having to like engage with people of different backgrounds. I don't know how like taking them into homeschooling where they only meet members of their own families, like corrects, like you said. But like, you know, the problems with our public school system and the way it functions, even in that sense, are things that like Candace Owens and him probably agree on. Like they probably agree that we should have regressive property taxes funding our school system for the most part. So it's kind of hard to take their like criticisms of the faults that kind of creates very seriously.
Yeah, well, they don't, I mean, the thing is that, as they will explain in this clip, they are trying to undercut the concept of public schooling in and of itself, not improving it in the ways that you're laying out, Brandon, but presenting alternatives in order to sap public schools of funding and promote school choice. Let's hear from Candace Owens and Robert Malone further, unfortunately for us.
Their same age group, they have to interact with a diverse world of diverse ages and points of view. And you know what happens? They come out better leaders. They come out better able to interact with teams. My younger son is knocking it out of the park. I do feel strongly that among the other things that is severely damaging our children is the educational system that we've allowed to develop.
Well, I've likened it to Hitler youth programs, to Stalin youth programs, and there's a reason for that. It is the government raising your children to believe whatever the government wants your children to believe in that moment. And the reason why I talk about this corrosion of what it means to be maternal, even, it's stunning to me of this, and women don't realize it when we're young. I certainly didn't realize it when I was young, this sort of pro-feminist messaging in school that hits early and says, you shouldn't want a man, you shouldn't want, you know, to raise your family at home. If you aspire to being married and raising your kids at home, then you're a failure. That is the quiet
subtext.
messaging.
Yeah.
That is totally the subtext, the subliminal messaging that's happening.
Gotta say, I never got that when I went to public or when I went to private school. Didn't get that messaging. Anyway,
There's a piece here on vaccine safety, ivermectin and the Dark Horse podcast investigation. Bradley, if you could pull that up. There's a section here on Robert Malone. I just want to read from it. Let's see. Here it is. Dr. Robert Malone, the vaccine whistleblower, that Dr. Robert Malone is making these claims should be a cause for concern among audiences. He's billed as the inventor of mRNA vaccines, and he's pitched as a brave whistleblower ready to sound the alarm on the research he's pioneered. Malone was everything that Kirsch wasn't to sober, measured, and definitive. Yet, and then Fuller says, yet it's highly unclear if he was the inventor at all, which is generally credited to Caitlin Carrico. It is interesting that the veteran journalist Matt Taibbi, who has written in support of Brett Weinstein from a free speech angle on a number of occasions, initially wrote of Malone as, quote, the inventor of the mRNA vaccine technology on June 16th. But in his subsequent piece on July 2nd, Malone was described only as, quote, a former Salk Institute researcher often credited with helping develop the mRNA technology, a much weaker claim. Nowhere, and I would be interested, if anyone's been reading Taibbi's work closer than I have lately, I'd be interested if Matt Taibbi explained the cause for that change, but I'll just continue. Nowhere until his pandemic appearances on Fox News and the Daily Mail and Brett's podcast has Malone claimed to be the inventor of mRNA vaccines. He has claimed to be the inventor of DNA vaccines on his website since 2010, though. We're not told, as mentioned earlier, that he is also on the advisory board of Trial Site News, either a key medical site for vaccine skeptical information. So I just want to put that in the context of this fucking quack.
Yeah. I mean, go on.
I was going to say, I can only imagine that what, Candace Owens means about schools teaching you that you don't need no man or whatever is like that, we've expanded access to birth control in schools. We have condoms sometimes in some schools, not even sort of federal government mandate. We have condoms, we have access to sex ed in some place. And so it's less about what they're teaching you and more about what they're not teaching you, which is a version of sex ed that emphasizes that women's role is, basically as a vessel for God to pump out more people. And, anything that's short of that is, supposed to be some kind of perverted sexual education. And, that's just another, like I said before, that's just another form of sexual education that is being disguised as just the way things are supposed to be, and really it's just, it's Christian dogma.
Yeah, and the other part of it too, there's the Christian dogma, but there's also the capitalist dogma that they are like clearly wanting the youth to be absorbing, because when they talk about, he says there that it's an industrial assembly line model at schools. They're just projecting there because that's what they want.
They want a Foxconn feeder system.
Exactly. That's what they want with this anti-CRT push too. It's don't question America's greatness and thus don't question your place in it. And when you don't question your place in it, you are a very easy employee for a capitalist.
Yeah, the humanities are that. There's a reason capitalists hate humanities education.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they want. And so for so much of this, it's conservative projection, obviously.
I have also another clip from the Decoding the Gurus podcast, which did a really in-depth investigation into Malone and McCulloch, the two COVID gurus that Joe Rogan has on. And I think it's really useful to go in and familiarize yourself with just how fucking crazy these people are. But there's a section from Decoding the Gurus, if you have this, Bradley, just to get a sense of the type of claims that Malone says on Joe Rogan. And they like to hide behind, it's just this minor stuff about maybe ivermectin might have some minor effect, antiviral effect. No, he's a full-on plandemic quack.
For people to hear, so here you go. And we've had a giant loss of life, a giant number, millions and millions of unnecessary hospitalizations. And it seemed to me, and I've told Tucker Carlson and many others, it seems to me early on, there was an intentional, very comprehensive suppression of early treatment in order to promote fear, suffering, isolation, hospitalization, and death. And it seemed to be completely organized and intentional in order to create acceptance for and then promote mass vaccination.
So you believe this is a premeditated thing that they were doing. So they realized that in order to get people enthusiastic about taking this vaccine, the best way to do that was to not have a protocol for treatment.
It's not just my idea. Now it's completely laid out by the book by Dr. Pam Popper, the book recently published by Peter Breggin, COVID-19 and the Global Predators, We Are the Prey.
We Are the Prey. Yes.
So yeah.
Okay.
You can go into the boys at Decoding the Gurus go into these in depth, so I would recommend that. But that's the level of the claims that, and if Joe Rogan wants to get on and say, well, looky here, it was all a pandemic, he should do that. And let's see what Spotify, how they start sweating then.
Walsh's arranged daddy. I don't know what that is. This Boeing case is a perfect example of why nuclear power is not attainable in our current power structure. Our government cannot regulate transport effectively. I agree with this. They wouldn't be able to stop private power companies from putting millions in harm's way. Not that this is that is a change from our current regulation of our power infrastructure. And I know there's like a genuine split with leftists on nuclear power, so I mean I don't pretend to know all the answers, but that's really where I sit for sure. Aaron is not cool. It's kind of hard to make education a big governmental thing when all the education is at the local level, which is why Emma never got that teaching, because we don't have a federal education curriculum, so this is all anecdotal, yeah. And it's easy to just make that case and then activate parents at the local level, I think. Benito, hello from Europe. What do you think is so wrong with many Americans? In the 1940s, they came here to fight fascism and nationalism, yet you have a whole lot of citizens that nowadays love that way to government and culture. By the way, in Europe, we watch American news and we laugh, not as much as when Trump was in power, but still funny and stupid. It looks like a comedy, a sad comedy, because there are people on the other side of the canon. So yes, what is wrong with some of your compatriots? Oh, and last thing, Candace Owens is super stupid. Adios, left is best. You packed a lot in there, Benito, but agree with a lot. I've heard this anecdote from a lot of people that people in other countries find our ridiculous governmental system and our media to be quite comedic. So I don't think your experience is your own experience. I think a lot of people share it. Sam's only fan. Hi, Emma and MR crew. Any chance we can have an interview with Greta Thunberg about the current global efforts to fight climate change? I mean, I would love it. I chased that interview with her at TYT very aggressively, and she was too busy when she came to the New York City. But maybe we could have her on Zoom. I think she's a pretty big deal.
Check out the La Ruta del Clima interview we did with those guys. I think their message is the one that people need to be hearing.
Yeah. Jerem Clean, chemical engineer here. We're all stuck because our all jobs are market driven. I've had to move from one toxic bauxite alumina industry to another in design for oil and gas companies. When I change countries, I'm changing again, and it's tough. I mean, yeah, I wish that there were more public jobs for our engineers in this country. I know someone personally who didn't want to work for Boeing and went to work for Boeing because that's kind of where the market goes. J-Man Raps, great interview, Emma. In relation to Jordan Peterson, isn't it amazing how the supposedly anti-authoritarians never talk about the murderous sanctions imposed by the American empire? Yeah, it is. It's not amazing, but it is annoying, for sure. All right, let's do another clip. Shall we?
Let's do a clip. Or we can do a call. We haven't done we only did one call so far.
No, we did two.
Great call, though. I mean, we did.
Kermit and
I forgot. How did I forget about Kermit?
You forgot about Kermit? That was what I was referring to.
Forgot about Kermit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we won't forget about him when his litigation at the recommendation of Brandon hits the courts.
Sesame Street has a lot of money. I can only imagine.
Should we play the Tucker Carlson one?
Which one?
There's two. Oh. Both of them sound great, honestly. As in great, I mean absolutely insane. But
we should do 5. We should do the.
Okay.
Let's do 5. Yeah, it's very tied to something that's newsy, so maybe we should do that one. Yeah.
Okay. So Jeff Zucker of CNN has resigned because of a relationship that he had with a colleague, which was consensual. But it seems like, I don't know, there's some. This is in the midst of Cuomo's resignation from the network, dubious ethics on display by CNN, in order to kind of protect one of their top-rated anchors. So Zucker's out. Tucker Carlson wants to jump on this story and give his take. Of course, it's insane. All good.
Still, on this day when we should be celebrating Jeff Zucker's departure, we're not celebrating. Why is that? Because we see a pattern here. There are an awful lot of contemptible leaders in corporate America, maybe most of them, but only a certain kind of CEO ever gets fired. It's not the weak ones. The guys who do what they're told, issue the cringy statements and let the HR department run everything, those people tend to keep their jobs till they retire. People like that just want to get it over with and cash out. They don't take risks. They don't dare to build anything. They're just caretakers. If their dignity is the price of job security, they are happy to pay it. More than at any time in our history, America is run by people like that. It's only the strong who are punished. Strong leaders tend to be abrasive. They're arrogant. Sometimes they're what we now call abusive. They ignore convention. They say outrageous things in public and private. They don't blend in with the group. Often they alienate the more sensitive types around them. They don't have maternal instincts. A lot of modern people are put off by strong leaders, but you've got to have them. Creative masculine energy is the essential quality in any civilization. It's how we got civilization in the first place. But increasingly, boisterous masculinity is systematically suppressed to make way for a timid caretaker class, for people who think the whole point of society is to get to zero COVID infections or eliminate all traffic deaths. Those may sound like virtuous goals. In fact, they're signifiers of decline. Not dying can never be the whole point. If it is, you're already dead.
Yeah, but but not dying is a pretty big, important part of civilization being created, right? You know, it's almost like there is an important role for, I don't know, say people with maternal instincts in order to make sure the society stays afloat, given the fact that women or cis women are responsible for creating life in that way.
I like how the people in his vision of the way the world works, the people who are in control of the company are not like the CEO, sort of C-suite or like upper directors or board of directors. It's actually like a shadowy cabal of like HR reps who are like waiting in the wings to like fire any person who doesn't use the right pronouns. And it's a very interesting way to get around like the obvious problems with this, form of like far right rhetoric, which is that they support authoritarianism generally. Like they support like, at will hiring and at will work. They support the police having more money. They support the FBI having, carte blanche to do whatever they want. And their real only problem is when that authoritarianism is turned towards them in even most minor ways, or people who can, vaguely stand in for them, which are like public facing CEOs or public facing employees of other like media companies. And it's very transparent that like, it's never like the CEO or the board of directors, the people who they're supposed to be worshiping that are causing these bad things. It's always just like an undercurrent of like HR reps or like a deep state within the real FBI who are just waiting.
Yeah.
Also, this is an instance of saying the exact opposite of the truth when he says that, for instance, zero COVID policies would be signs of deterioration or a decline. That's actually a flex. When China surpasses the EU in the size of the economy, like they grow and faster than the EU while doing zero COVID, that is a flex of state power from my perspective. And I think it's a sign of decline that we have the largest raw numbers of deaths, terrible per capita numbers, and our economy still sucks ass. I think that's a sign of decline. And I think a lot of people, that's the interesting thing about Tucker bringing up the zero COVID thing, because you have a lot of other people that like to suggest they're sort of anti-imperialist, but they've taken on this sort of you're overreacting to coronavirus thing. Meanwhile, basically they're come to find that they're basically repeating the point from the West, saying, hey, China, stop your zero COVID stuff because we need you to even more stuff from you guys, and you're threatening us.
Yeah.
Like we this let it rip thing, it hasn't helped our economy, and it's killed and maimed millions of people.
And at the same time, he's also trying to normalize like workplace abuse, basically, right? Because
abuse.
Right. I mean, it's just saying he loves saying something in a sarcastic tone and not really following up in order to discredit it. And he does his other favorite thing because he says contemptible leaders in corporate America are the ones that built this country. So essentially, if you're a Roger Ailes type, I don't know, he might have a vested interest in normalizing that, Tucker Carlson. If you are an abusive boss, if you are participating in some sort of terrible power dynamics with your subordinates, then yeah, that's actually just the price of being a good leader. And the flip side of that is you are a man with maternal instincts, because Tucker's done this before. Feminization equals weakness. He wants to draw that comparison and make that link at any chance that he gets. It's also what Josh Hawley's doing on his podcast and in the lead up to his eventual presidential run in 2024. So there's a lot of isms in what he has to say.
It's such a weird defense too, like who he's defending and why. Like, I don't know if everyone who's listening is familiar with what happened. I mean, I know you summarized it, but at the top, but the story is really bizarre. Like, so Jeff Zucker has this executive that works under him that he's constantly very close with. She previously worked as a comms director for Andrew Cuomo. And from what I've read, she was integral in those Chris Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo, CNN TV hits that were really popular in the early days of the pandemic. And then this information where Zucker and her were having a relationship came out during the Chris Cuomo investigation, which apparently she tried to hinder, if I'm from reading what I was reading correctly, because obviously she has ties to the Cuomo family. On top of that, a report came out a year ago where this woman was internally being discussed as the person to take Jeff Zucker's place after Jeff Zucker stepped down at CNN. I mean, that is absurd now that we know that they were in a relationship together, that basically CNN is this big interwoven, like it's run by like this big incestual, can't even say triangle, I guess, because there's 4 people involved, both Cuomo brothers, Zucker and this woman. It's like unbelievable how ridiculous this story is coming out. And again, Zucker had to let the company know he was having this relationship with this woman. I'm assuming he didn't let them know because they were having an affair. Both are married with children and left their partners to have this relationship after they'd already been doing it. I mean, I don't know what you would defend here, unless, I don't know, you had a very personal reason of your own to defend it. Now I'm just speculating, but
well, that's the point, right?
Knows?
Like, just a quick point on that, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Binder, but this is very specific with what Tucker's been doing in relation to the Cuomo story. If you recall, when Chris Cuomo was ousted, he defended Chris Cuomo on air and talked about how he was just supporting his family. And the feminizing liberals who don't want to have any gender roles fired him because he was being a family man and backing his brother. And now he's defending Jeff Zucker in this area. It's just something to pay attention to, as you mentioned.
No, I agree. And I think, it's the perfect kind of argument to bring to bring the 2 main populations that it appeals to together, to be one big tent under Tucker Carlson, which is that A, it has the rampant misogyny for his normal fans, and B, for like the media class that sort of orbits around Fox News and that finds themselves like being in the same social position as Tucker Carlson. It appeals to their, class anxiety regarding, this moral panic of cancel culture. Like he's just, they could one day come for your job either because you're a misogynist or because you're just trying to use your position to help your brother. And isn't that just what the media is supposed to be doing, right? It's an unfortunate byproduct of where we've gotten to, that we can't really, parse out the level of, class solidarity that just people who have public facing media jobs that they make, the majority of their majority of their living from, have with each other. And Tucker Carlson knows that it exists, and he's very willing to weaponize it as long as you get on board with his other problematic ideas.
Yep.
It reminds me of thinking about the from the outside looking at, say, the Democratic Party and their inability to update the leadership and the sort of need for continuity of leadership. Like we need Hillary in there, we need Joe Biden, stuff like, right? Like
Pelosi.
And like that seems to me like something you do when you have skeletons you don't want to let out, and you don't want to give over the helm to somebody who you can't trust to keep those skeletons closeted. And I just think that's that repeats itself all over organizations now, and it's just like I think like I don't know, that's just I thought of the Democrats, I guess. That's what I'm saying.
Mel Blunt, Sarah Nelson would be a great guest. She was once before, I believe. Isn't she considering AFL president? Yeah, I mean, Bradley, maybe we'll write that down. Yeah. I also want to, speaking of labor, Kim Kelly is writing a book on that's coming out in April. So a little behind the scenes, guys. I meant to say that, Bradley, if we could put her on the list for a guest. Kim Kelly. All right. Maddie Moron, big imperialist cope in the Wall Street Journal report that the Biden administration views Iran as too close to breakout capacity in their nuclear program to restart the JCPOA, just an attempt to mask their inability to force the Iranian government to make massive additional unilateral concessions in their negotiations before re-entering the deal that we tore up while they were in total compliance, says Maddie Moron. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, the Biden administration also, as I mentioned at the start of the show, has shown zero interest in restarting some of the talks that Obama was honestly, it was a good thing that Obama was doing in terms of our relationship with Cuba and reopening.
Good use of the State Department,
exactly.
The Iran deal and the Cuba stuff.
But I mean, to me, those are Obama's two biggest accomplishments, or in terms of things I liked, and Biden has seen. Like, there has been zero progress on either front, honestly, even though there's a lot of talk about Iran still negotiating with Blinken and the State Department. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of progress there.
It's another thing from this freak that the Democrats tolerate in their party, like Robert Menendez, who's speaking out. There's this Times of Israel article, top Democrat questions ever to revive Iran nuke deal, signaling trouble for Biden. Robert Menendez, who heads the Senate Foreign Relations. I mean, Menendez is just like open.
Menendez is a crook.
Yeah, he's a criminal. And we just have him on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee deciding this sort of shit. It's fucking appalling.
As he tees up fucking sanctions right now with Russia. So anyway.
Really a frustrating day.
Yeah. Jesus. Yeah. Sorry, Brandon, did you want to say something about that? I feel like I cut you off.
Oh, no, just saying it just goes back to what the previous caller, or I am, speaking from an outside of America perspective, was saying. I think that Americans have gotten so used to the volatility of their own country's governance, and how every 4 years your civil rights, if you're unlucky, are just up for vote, that they don't really appreciate how that volatility looks from an outside perspective. And so the question of even Iran, who followed they followed the deal, but because of our volatility, our new president ripped it up, and now this new president wants to bring it back. Is that their unwillingness
bring it back, but I want to look tough, so I'm going to get additional concessions, even though the initial deal was actually great, and we were the ones that violated it.
Yeah, other countries' unwillingness to pretend like our governing system is functional in the way that we pretend it is, just becomes their problem, and as framed by our media. They don't understand the kind of government we have, where every 4 years fascism might take control. So they need to appreciate that, and also we're better than them.
Right. Right, bend the knee. Another Matt, my college roommate was brilliant, good-hearted person who got funneled to Northrop Grumman out of college after he graduated in engineering. He now works for Silicon Valley, I think. He hated it, but had to pay out of his debt. Chomsky says that the debt is what does it. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. If we that's why it's bullshit when you hear all these arguments saying, well, these people that have these degrees will go on to make such and such. Well, it's they're forced into high earning careers because they need to pay for that education that they got. If you could just go get a humanities degree from one of these major institutions and not owe hundreds of $1,000s, you could go back to the hometown that you were at and start a small newspaper or something like that. But instead, you've got to go work for Wall Street or one of these countries that can make money for capitalists.
Mm-hmm. That you can go to school for engineering but try to save the environment, but when you get out, you realize working for Greenpeace isn't going to let you pay off $100,000 in student loans, so you go to work for Exxon, and by the time your debt is paid off, you're absorbed in the culture, and that's that. Student loan debt is nothing more than social control, but you all know that. I mean, absolutely, but you said it very well, another Matt. It also, it's the people that have the luxury of going to work for nonprofits or something like that when they go out of school, or people that already come from wealthy backgrounds and are usually more interested in maintaining that lifestyle sometimes than going into those industries. So it limits it doubly if you do graduate without student debt and you're one of those select, very lucky few. I mean, it's the same thing also with doctors. Going to school to be a doctor, crippling student debt. And you want to talk about racism and classism in that profession, and like the fact that there have been studies about how there are something like a third of doctors believe racist tropes and difference in pain management, for example, for black patients versus white patients. That's because of that selection process. Weeding people out. Yeah.
I was gonna say, Emma, that's not real, but the larger conspiracy regarding them all hiding the true treatment of COVID is that all of that stuff, all of those structural issues that the right never acknowledges aren't real, except for in the narrow slice of them not wanting you to buy, hydrochloroquine and ivermectin and monoclonal antibodies, and I don't know what else. So
yeah, they want all of America's doctors like, we want this suffering.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Just for you two, but that is satire.
I mean, it just becomes impossible to explain why they want it. I feel like from a far right perspective, because they just, all the reasons that they might want it, any kind of global conspiracy the far right agrees with. They just don't want to be subject to like the same draconian rules in their minds.
Jenna Tolles, Emma, love the show, but I'm really surprised to hear all about the show's take on the Tucker Carlson M&M story. I make love to all my candies and snacks. You're all way off on this one. Please come down from your ivory tower. I guess that's not my lived experience, but I should be more open to those things.
I'm not a big M&M fan, and I don't want that to come across as some sort of edgelord opinion. They're just not my favorite candy. I don't know
candy.
I don't have a big sweet tooth. I prefer pretzels or like Cheez-It type salty snacks.
I do like those.
I would say Kit Kats are one of my favorite candy. The big cat Kit Kat, which has gotten smaller. I mean, I don't want to, sound like Trump, but things have changed in this country. And I guess I like Twix.
Okay.
Twixes, Twixie, Twi.
Yeah, Twi is correct. Binder, what's your favorite candy?
I'm a big marshmallow guy. When we're talking sweets, marshmallows very good. Chocolate covered marshmallows, like those during Easter, the eggs, and I guess during Christmas too. They do like the Santa Claus ones. Those are very delicious.
Those make me vomit. They're so sweet.
Oh yeah,
I like them a lot though.
Like Peeps? Do you eat Peeps?
Yeah, no, I don't like Peeps. No.
How about
the
candy
sugar
corn?
on top of the marshmallow, like the pure sugar on top of the marshmallow is too much. Give me a Snickers bar. The ice cream Snicker bars are really good. Have you guys ever had those? Those are amazing.
Yeah, they are good. Have you guys had Take 5?
So I can't have any of that.
Oh, you are? Have you had
Take 5
bars? Oh, you can't because there's peanuts. Yeah.
A lot of chocolate bars have nuts in them.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm a big Reese's guy.
Rice Krispie treats.
They're trying to make it into too much things. Like there's Reese's everything now. Just give me the peanut butter cups.
Josh from Tucson, Jenna Tolles, really, Emma, you didn't catch that? Now I did. Also, Fifth Avenue is the best candy bar. I don't even know what that is. All right, let's take another call. Being very diligent about the calls today. Calling from a 713 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, everybody. My name is Alex. I'm calling in from Texas.
Alex from Texas. What's on your mind?
Well, last night I was doing some reading, and actually, y'all were talking about, I forgot that Matt, I'm glad I called in on Thursday, because I remember Matt is, I just heard that, I know Matt knows he has a lot to say about the NFT and the cryptos, and I read something, and I agree with Matt on all that stuff, but I read something last night, and I want to see what Matt thought of it.
Sure.
All right. So, have you heard of decentralized autonomous organizations?
Yeah, DAOs. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Last night I was reading on the Anarchist Library. There was an essay that came out called "No Ethical Activism Under Capitalism." You check it out. It's on like the second page right now. You probably want to check it out because it's a very interesting theory about how DAOs could be leveraged by unions. Of course, corporations are going to use them to keep people, in that, locked into their corporate this, that, and the other. But at the same time, there are some activists out there who are saying, look, this is going to happen. So we either become non-player characters or we bend this thing to our will. And how would that look?
Okay, to that I say, but what is going to happen? Like you can already create a group of people that each have a vote on something. It doesn't require people buy in with tokens. If you want to have a membership club where you have to have a membership fee, you can do that. It doesn't require a DAO. And everyone gets a vote. Like the thing with DAOs is that the more you put in, the more votes you get. I don't see how that's in any way applicable to what we want in a leftist or progressive society. The more money you have to buy tokens, the more votes you get, the bigger say you have. I mean, that's essentially what you can do with these organizations, these DAOs.
Right. Okay. And then what they were saying, it was interesting also to hear that, like, there was a lot of optimism with this. Of course, I'm very skeptical. I'm sure you are too. But I want to see what you thought about this. I'll float it out there. So, I mean, they're also saying, there's a lot of stuff that was said in this article. And you know what? You have a show, right? I might have to call into your show to elaborate up
right.
for now.
Tonight you call in, yeah.
Okay, so, but I'll give you this example and I'll hang up and listen. So, for example, like if there's if you want to go international with this, let's say that there's a pipeline in Ecuador that these people are fighting, and in this article they were saying, look, we can just use crypto, and they have apparently they're trying to establish these DAOs that's the theory in this article, and why not just skirt the whole system and just funnel in some crypto, and it would undermine the ruling class, so on and so forth. I wanted to see what you thought about that.
I mean, I don't quite understand how that would do that, though. I mean,
can I just say
it's the equivalent for this show? Let me just put it this way because I have an idea. I don't want to forget it. It's the equivalent to when Jackson Hinkle called into this show and had a debate with Sam and acted like YouTubers had any power to force anybody's will. Like, what is a bunch of activists putting their money into Bitcoin or Ether or Dogecoin or anything? What is that doing to fuck with the system? Absolutely nothing. The only people of any power to mess with the system are going to be the whales who don't want to mess with the system. They just want to extract more money from the fools who are putting their money in, who think they're messing with the system. They're just giving their money to those whales. I mean, literally, I don't understand like what this idea is that any of this, like if venture capitalists are backing this stuff, you think they're looking to buck the system to create they're looking to buck the system as in pay lower taxes and make more money for themselves. That's how they're looking to buck the system. They're not looking to buck the system in the same way you or I are.
Right. Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt, what were you going to say? I want to hear.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, my problem with these sorts of arguments is it's all purely theoretical now. Like, my point is, like, do it once. Like, come through for one of these causes and help them win using blockchain, and then we'll have something else to talk about. But I would suggest that the reason it hasn't happened yet is because people own crypto to make a bunch of money to sell later, not to donate it to some cause they think is worthy. And a lot of people could just be donating to those causes now when they're not. And I think the reason why you hear a lot of people talk about these social justice things is just because they need new markets to buy into this stuff. And so I'm pretty cynical about all this stuff, but I'll be less cynical when it actually starts delivering one or two victories, right? I think that's my line in the sand.
It's such an abstract. It's like yet another abstraction. It's like, oh my God, I mean, Jesus.
Yeah.
Anyways, all right. Well, thanks for that. And Matt, Matt, I also have I got a 10-month-old, so maybe another night I'll try to call. Hopefully, we'll see how the time she goes to sleep.
Oh yeah, feel free to call on any night where I'm streaming. Absolutely, love to take your call.
Awesome. All right then.
Have a good one.
Later. Bye. Thanks, Emma.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the
also,
call, Alex.
Just going off what the caller was saying. I know this isn't the caller's opinion, but he was reading the article. The idea, I don't understand where this idea from progressives or anarchists or whoever says they're left of center and wants to steal crypto for us. Like, what other capitalistic aspect of this world do we look at in that way? Nothing. Like the idea that, you know, we're going to take crypto for ourselves. It's inevitable. So we need to take this DAO or this NFT and make it leftist. Like, what other abhorrent feature of capitalism do we look at like that? Nothing else. So I don't understand this whole idea that we need to look at this new burgeoning technology that is just, we can't do anything about. We can't stop it. It's coming, even though like the majority of people don't have any idea what it even is. We can't stop that. I mean, it's the whole argument for it is ludicrous.
Clever marketing. Yep.
We lost Brandon. You still there, Brandon?
Might be taking a little break. Can we play this while we're waiting for him to come back? Do we have this clip of Paris Hilton and Jimmy Fallon?
Oh God, yeah. Okay.
This is
maybe. Do you want to just wait for him to get back, or do you want to do it now?
No, it's up to you guys. If we can wait for him.
Well, let's just get. I'll read I'll give it 60 seconds because I think he might want to weigh on it too. I'll read some IMs in the meantime, and then we'll just see if he's able to come back. Just because the clip is so ridiculous. Female 4MR says, I have been a longtime listener and lover of the crew and the passion you all bring, but it is shocking to see the lack of female voices and representation in the listeners. I can't remember the last time a woman called into the show and discussed anything. Why don't you invite more of us? I mean, I would love to invite you. I think this is a really male-dominated space. I mean, I've discussed some of the, even when I at TYT, it's just like there's a self-selecting process sometimes with women because this talking about politics is seen as like divisive or aggressive. And so often women are conditioned to be a little bit more congenial.
And you have to be willing to put up with a certain different kind of attention.
Right. I mean, so there's a lot of that. I saw someone wrote in recently and said that I was a female misogynist because I forget even what it was. And they said something like she only likes to hang out with guys or whatever. People would love to know. In my personal life, I mostly have female friends, and so but the space is very male dominated, and so that might be why you perceive me maybe as a female misogynist. It's not the case. But
you're hanging out with dudes, Emma. You hate women.
It's just I only work with men. There we go, and perfect timing. After I got off my soapbox, Brandon's back, and we are down to talk about Paris Hilton, if you are so able, Brandon.
I mean, I love talking about Paris Hilton. Sorry about dropping there for a second. You know, I had a bit of a internet hiccup.
All good. So Paris Hilton, I don't know. I mean, this is maybe a week old or so. Was on with Jimmy Fallon on his talk show. Seems like both of them have some significant crypto investments. It is one of the most uncomfortable clips that you'll ever see. Paris Hilton, Jimmy Fallon, who's just, I mean, is like an empty vessel of like whatever NBC wants him to do at this point. The forced laughter, it's deeply disturbing watching Jimmy Fallon do his job. They are pushing NFTs on the audience, and the way that the audience is like attempting to try to get enthusiastic because they're there to have a good time, see Jimmy Fallon, maybe they're in New York City for a weekend. It's hard to watch. And then we'll all react after we. So, disclaimer.
This is alien. This is an alien invasion.
Yeah, this is a historical artifact. When people look at this insane like crypto time period, they're gonna play this, and everyone's gonna say, "Oh my God, how is this real life?" Watch.
Yeah, I jumped in.
I know. I heard. I'm so happy I taught you what they were.
You did. You taught me what's up, and then I bought an ape.
I got an ape too because I saw you on the show with Beeple and you said you got on MoonPay, so I went and I copied you and did the same thing.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
This is your
mine.
ape.
Yeah,
we debuted.
It's really cool.
Oh my God, this is dumb as shit, man.
How did you
look at the crowd being forced to applaud?
Your ape.
Yes, I was going through a lot of them and I was like, I want something that like kind of reminds me of me, but this one, it does. I think we made like another version of it where takes the hat off and blonde hair comes out. So,
Yeah, because you can do it now whatever you
Yeah,
want.
that sounds so incredible.
animated version.
We're part of the same. We're part of the same community. We're both apes. Here's this is my ape.
Yours. Yours is so cool. I love the red heart sunglasses. I love the captain hat.
It reminded me of me a little bit because I wear striped shirts. I've worn these heart sunglasses because my daughters, just as a joke, they have them, and as a joke, I put them on. So I've done this, and I love yacht rock. And
it
being breezy.
screams
So
you.
like, yeah, that kind of, and I like the blue. Dude, look at us.
They look like they could be friends.
They're buddies.
Yeah, they're
They look
called
like they could be
talent swaps.
friends. They look like they could be friends because they're the same fucking ape with a color swap and wearing different clothes. It's the same base drawing. And also, they said that they bought apes. I want to be clear. They didn't buy apes. They bought the receipt that links to the JPEG of that ape. That's what you're buying when you buy an NFT. I want everyone to know that. You buy a token, a string of letters and numbers that sits on a blockchain that points to the location where the JPEG is stored. That's all it is. You don't own the copyrights to that. Every NFT project's a little different in terms of what you can do with it. Bored Ape says that if you buy an NFT connected to one of their apes, you have carte blanche to do whatever you want to the image. They still own the copyright though.
Yeah, I mean, they look like they could be friends. They look like they're like in the witness protection program, and it's the same ape. That's what it is.
There's a great section from Max Reed's Substack that we talked about last night on Left Reckoning, but I'll just read this for everybody. If you pay attention to both the Hollywood trades and the crypto press and smoke enough weed, you can begin to pick out the contours of an expanding, interconnected, celebrity-based Web3 financial cultural complex. Did you know, for example, that Jimmy Fallon is represented by CAA, which is an investor in the NFT marketplace OpenSea, and which recently signed a deal to represent the NFT collector, blah, 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 whatever his name is, who owns NFTs from Bored Ape Yacht Club and World of Women. Did you know that another CAA client, Ashton Kutcher, is an investor in OpenSea through his company Sound Ventures, or that Kutcher will be starring in a Netflix rom-com called Your Place or Mine with Reese Witherspoon, the most prominent owner of World of Women NFTs, who also happens to be married to a CAA agent, or that the people behind World of Women and Bored Ape Yacht Club are both represented by Kutcher's partner in Sound Ventures, the music manager Guy Osieri. Did you know that Osieri's other major venture these days is PeerPop, a platform for connecting TikTok influencers to celebrities for collaborations, a platform used by none other than Paris Hilton? And Emma was just talking to us before the show that a lot of the sport athletes are also represented by this agency.
Aaron Rodgers, who now is into crypto, CAA. Saquon Barkley also said he's going to take a salary in crypto, CAA, I believe, as well.
So this is just a way for celebrities to commodify attention and leave you with a pointless receipt for an ape as they get like tens of thousands of dollars or whatever these apes are going for.
I mean, like it's the equivalent of again, like the Paris Hilton and Jimmy Fallon going on there and like, look at my Beanie Baby. This one is a dog and this one is a rabbit. I mean, how amazing is it? It
At least
totally
it would be
reflects
a physical thing then, though.
It totally reflects my brand because I like striped shirts and I wear these heart glasses. It's like, dude, tell us more. Tell us more. That's what Bradley said.
Bradley or Matt, can you check the chat, the Zoom chat for a second and pull up that link I just brought up? Now, remember when Paris Hilton said that they created a version of her ape? Now refresh that video. Remember she said they created a version of the ape where her hair comes out when she takes the hat off? Look at Gwyneth Paltrow's ape. Now, do you think Paris Hilton and Gwyneth Paltrow happened to just have the same idea and they went and put this together in Photoshop themselves? Or do you think that their agency that they probably both share went ahead and mass produced this shit for them so they could promote their NFTs?
I think it's probably the latter.
Yeah, there we go.
I think celebrities promoting this NFT craze is a very powerful tool in kind of getting people to feel like NFTs are a suitable and reasonable vehicle to escape the larger scam of capitalism. And so much of like the, arguments for why you should be involved, including the sort of DAO argument is, implies that because this has been used theoretically by a handful of individuals to enrich themselves and escape like the day-to-day grind of going to work, then it must be inherently liberatory and therefore inherently scalable up to like a mass movement level. When we know it's just like it's a handful of people trading apes back and forth. in order to raise their value, so that at some point someone gets left holding the bag, because most of the people watching that show, even though the pictures are worthless, won't be able to afford a Bored Ape Yacht Club ape. They'll be encouraged to start at these in the marketplace at cheaper and cheaper things, which most of which will be scams, they're going to be caught up in. Like once Gwyneth Paltrow or whatever, Reese Witherspoon's ape goes down to $1, that's just not going to be that important to her. But the people who lose, $2,000 worth of like Sol or Ethereum or whatever in the next few weeks, that's going to really hit their wallet if you believe them.
I wish
you could lose that too without even buying an NFT. Look what happened yesterday with that blockchain bridge wormhole, where basically they had something like $325 million sitting on their blockchain, and a hacker found an exploit and stole it. And so $325 million of regular people's, I'm sure some rich people too, money just poof, gone.
They're just going to print more. They're going to print more Ethereum.
Well, that's exactly what's going on. They said literally hours later that they're going to replenish their Ethereum, their Ether, and back all the money one to one. Of course, everyone just has 325 mil just sitting for a rainy day. What's likely happening here is they're going to probably tank the price of Ether, so it's more affordable when they replenish what's gone. And then B, it's probably going to come from VC money from other platforms, so that they can prop up the entire market, because there's no doubt about it, 325 mil disappearing, that's going to take a big hit to both cryptos.
Yep. They're just going to. I mean, I've heard people say, and when I was also reading the news about this, and so maybe you'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, that they're just going to, shadowy NFT organizations or crypto organizations are just going to print like more stable coin that is theoretically backed one-to-one by the US dollar, and encourage people to trade that for their Ethereum stores or other stores that they're holding, to therefore replenish that one-to-one. And the idea that this stable coin is backed by US dollars one-to-one is just a theory out there that some people might that is untested. And we've seen that.
You're absolutely correct, except it's not a theory. We've seen, because they were New York Attorney General Letitia James sued them, and they had to settle. We know that it's not backed one-to-one. They're basically backed by IOUs for the most part. So
that is a pyramid scheme. That is a pyramid scheme.
Yes, and every time. And there are Twitter accounts, for example, if you want a really easy way to track this data, that track every time Tether is printed up. And like clockwork, whenever the price of Bitcoin starts to drop and like a domino effect, tanking the rest of the market, all of a sudden hundreds of millions, if not billions, of Tether are suddenly printed up, put into the buying Bitcoin, basically market manipulation at its purest form to prop the price back up. And that's what happens every single time. Now, eventually, enough people will want real money in return. They'll want to cash in, and there won't be enough real money for them to cash out with. So that's probably when that bubble will burst. When that will happen, who knows? But that's the ball game right there.
It's all the joys of fiat currency with none of the guarantees of the government. The government blocking it.
My favorite thing is, I mentioned this on Left Reckoning yesterday, is like, not everyone who's into this has ideology as a motivational factor, but the libertarians who make up a large portion of the people who support crypto, what is one of like their biggest critiques of the U.S. economy, the Treasury printing up money that's not backed by gold, and there's no gold standard, just printing up money. Yet they're supporting something that's backed by not even a government, just nothing. They just print up magical money out of thin air, and they're going, yes, this is the way. This is what solves the thing we have a problem with.
Yeah, that's their argument about like the gold standard, whatever. It's just a way to promote austerity, but this gets them rich. So there you go.
Until they lose their money and they go like, what authorities do I call about this, about my fake money being stolen? It's like, so much of like the libertarian scheme or scam is predicated on like there being a larger non-libertarian society surrounding it, or at least, propping it up. And this is, one of those things where if you put them in the jungles, all they do is start wondering why there's not like an FDIC for crypto.
Call the man. They want to call the crypto manager. Greta writes in, Emma, I have funded to Greta's campaign multiple times, and I think I have an answer on why it's hard to get an interview with her. She's really good with speeches and profilers, but is not as good with open-ended interviews. She has issues with nervousness and loose. Yes, they're basically saying she has issues with nervousness and loses her train of thought in an interview format. So unless it's a pre-planned questions for BBC or the UN, she doesn't do in-depth interviews. She did a 45-minute interview with Democracy Now! I'd encourage everybody to listen to it, especially if you're also interested in like neurodiversity and someone talking openly about about autism and being on the spectrum. I thought that was actually a really moving element of that interview. I'm not lamenting the fact that I didn't get the interview. I'm just saying if you want to learn more about that kind of stuff, she's great on that. But as Matt mentioned, there are a ton of climate activists who don't get enough attention, often not white activists, and people who are from countries that are going to be affected.
And we don't want her to have to burden all that stuff when we have other people we can give attention to. Like I think she's great, but I also think we need to hear more from like people in the global south about reparations and repair and that sort of stuff.
Absolutely, that's the exact point, right? It's nothing against her. I admire her very much. I just want to disperse the voices in this area, and like also just kind of put a face to, as Matt said, like the nations that are going to be most hurt by climate change, because they don't get that. Dr. Nick, one of my roommates works for an NFT company, which can be a bit of a pain. However, yesterday they were supposed to have a big lunch for a major Italian fashion brand, which apparently went to absolute shit because it was all bought by bots. I just chuckled and told her to check Scam Economy. Thanks, Binder. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by the lunch. Oh, launch. Big launch for a major Italian fashion brand, which apparently... Okay. It sounds hilarious. Travis from Pittsburgh, NFTs are just big money hot potato. It really is just a pyramid scheme. And Jay Canfield, someone posted the most amazing explanation of NFTs. Everyone is sleeping with your spouse. Oh, it just went away. Everyone is sleeping with your spouse, but you have a marriage certificate. That's the NFT. Jersey Max, hey, don't blame crypto on weed. I've tested it, and no matter how much I've smoked, I still hate those dumb apes. That wasn't anyone blaming it. That was the author of the piece that Matt cited, just talking about how he made those connections, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It was a little bit of a little joke.
This is a very pro-weed show. I think that's quite clear.
I mean, actually, but I think it helps.
Yeah. All right, let's do one more clip here, at least. Marjorie Taylor Greene sat down with Alex Jones, talking about COVID, and she is... They've decided that this is why Anthony Fauci, right or wrong, needs to step down, because I don't see any reason why he needs to still be the face of this, because people like Alex Jones and Marjorie Taylor Greene, he's outlived his usefulness, in my opinion, and now he's just this boogeyman for her. And she makes another claim yet again about the efficacy of ivermectin, which is completely false. And another outrageous claim as well.
This is truly mental illness. Wearing a mask today after 2 years of this Chinese virus that has infected our country, this man-made Chinese virus that Dr. Fauci sent our tax dollars to and contributed to, but people still wearing masks. I mean, it's truly mentally ill. We know the masks don't work. And the vaccines don't work. People that are vaccinated are still getting COVID. But I think that people really have blood on their hands that have stopped the prescriptions of ivermectin, refused people who have had sick family members in the hospital of not being able to take ivermectin or any other kind of life-saving treatment or therapy. I mean, I truly think that we need to investigate all of these people and investigate the deaths that are reported on the VAERS system and hold people accountable, because it's Dr. Fauci and anyone at the CDC or anyone involved that stopped life-saving treatments and therapies, and people died. Well, I think they're guilty of murder.
We're still doing this ivermectin shit, huh?
Notice though how like once it was established for sure that hydroxychloroquine was bullshit, they don't mention it anymore. Like that was it. This we just need that official 100% clear study from, because ivermectin studies, they're still out there because people and the thing is ivermectin is very accessible in especially third world countries where ivermectin was used to treat other things before COVID. So I feel like that is what the difference is between ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine.
It's just a candidate for the possible one that has unclear signals scientifically, so grifters can suggest it's being.
And also when it's more accessible in that way too, Binder, it allows for, I don't know, people who listen to this garbage to buy it up as much as they want. And I don't know who that enriches. It must be, really benevolent people who are not responsible for the mass vaccination and evil vaccines that are being put into people's arms, right? Just like must be a different, distinct company. Oh, wait, ivermectin is also produced by pharmaceutical companies, and yet they can never actually reckon with that.
Right. I mean, I think also part of this is like the right and also to some extent the center left over, at our national level of politics are desperately and have been desperately since the beginning of the pandemic or since it got really out of control. And it was clear that it was going to be out of control more so in America than anywhere else, to come up with a reason why it's just okay and why it's really not their fault, either the fault of those in the government whose job it was to actually like establish this infrastructure in response to the possibility of a pandemic, and also the people in the media whose job it was to like actually inform us that it was not happening, that they weren't doing those things consistently enough to force it to happen. And so all we can really do, I think, in their opinions, is to ignore all the context that caused 1 million people to die and just move on from this sort of new starting point of like, well, now COVID is endemic and no one did anything in America really to stop that from happening because of our like just complete abandonment of any sort of accountability or any tools to hold people accountable. So, maybe we can start building that for a future thing, but COVID's already over and there should just be we should accept there's going to be no changes to the way we do things as a result. And that's just such a fatalistic view. And it's one that I think if people really believe, then they need to like start really coming up with like real plans for like personal climate change survival. Because if this is a sign of what's like things are going to be like when, we can no longer ignore that climate emergencies are happening so frequently as, to be simultaneous in this country and also around the world, they're just going to try to shunt it onto some other person. Like it's, big pharma. Yeah, we've been empowering big pharma for decades, but, now they're the bad guy because we need someone who's not us. And, big oil is going to be the problem with climate change, even though we've been expanding oil and allowing it to happen and advocating it should happen up until the point we couldn't ignore the consequences. And so, I don't know what the solution now that we've gotten this far is, but it doesn't seem to be to accept like the politicians and media's narrative from a standpoint that like, well, now this is just the way we live. Because like, that's just how it always becomes. Like that's the way, we went from not living with 1 million school shootings a year to like now we live with it. And, they're trying to make that be the case for COVID too. So you don't examine how school shootings, everything else it is, and how, much at fault they are.
It's a good parallel with school shootings because Alex Jones specifically and, Marjorie Taylor Greene is someone who consumed his content. I believe she was one of the crisis actor people. I mean, Bradley, if you don't mind looking that up, just so I don't say the wrong thing there. I believe that she made indications that she believed that some of the victims of school shootings were crisis actors. Obviously, Alex Jones has made that claim many times and has lost lawsuits because of those claims. And so, like, anything that's deadly and beyond our control, someone like Alex Jones and someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, they find a way to either say this is fake and here's why, or here is a way that you can direct your angst about these phenomenons. Here we go. Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Parkland was a
right. She said exactly. Okay, so she was a part of the false flag push. But shoot, what was I saying? Basically they allow for their, if you believe, you'll either believe all of this is planned and fake, or here's this boogeyman that doesn't challenge capitalism in any way. It makes it about the Jews. Let's be real about what Alex Jones is doing. It makes it about the Chinese, which is what they're doing in that clip there. It makes it about Fauci. Here are these people you can push your anger and angst about this onto, as opposed to like actually looking at things systemically. All right, let's take one more call. Calling from a 219. Actually, this is the second to last
Sorry,
call.
I don't know why you're just trying to censor Marjorie Taylor Greene there, but anyway.
Calling from a 219 area code. You are the second to last caller. I will take one more after this.
Oh, is this myself?
That's you.
Oh, how are you doing? This is Nathan from the Chicagoland area. Sometimes
Hi.
I'll call Matt to talk about wrestling.
Oh, cool. What's up, Nathan? I love the name Nathan. Great name.
Oh, thank you. So I think a while back there was a story about like AT&T dropping. This is a conversation about like the cord cutting culture and the digital media culture, and just kind of an observation.
Sure.
So are you aware of like services like Pluto TV?
Yes.
So like they have multiple news sections, and it's kind of like just looking at them, it's kind of like surprising how much of a market like right-wing conservative talk is. Because like for one TYT network, because they'll have like syndicated content from
I know,
TYT,
yeah. That's how I know of it.
There's like OAM Plus. You got America's Voice if you wanted to know what like Bill O'Reilly's up to. Dana Loresh from the former spokesperson of the NRA. If you want to listen to her all the time, yeah, you have bad taste, but you that's an option. Like Blaze, America's Voice, Newsmax. Like it's kind of like also it's kind of interesting because when you go to cord cutting services like Tubi, which is owned by Fox, they'll have none of those kind of content because it's Fox and they want to be the dominant brand. So like it's interesting, and it's also like Pluto TV is a property of like the CBS Viacom, and they use it like to lure people into like the whole like their other services. And it's kind of interesting how friendly they are to pick up that kind of like right-wing content, since there's so much of them.
Yeah, I mean it is interesting. I'm gonna hang up on you, but I wonder.
Oh, have a good day.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. I feel like there should be a little bit more oversight into some of these streaming platforms and the understanding of how they're funded and for what reason. My understanding is Pluto is just like trying to corner the market on like aggregating news shows that are a little outside of like the cable sphere, and so there seem to be casting a very wide net. Let's put it that way. Even though of course like I support watching TYT on that or whatever, but I wish for TYT's sake that they didn't have to be in the same bucket as these people.
I feel like I can't search. I've used Pluto before to watch Bridezillas, but I can't search. It doesn't have a search function, which makes it very unwieldy.
That it doesn't have a search function?
No, it tries to model itself after like live TV or DVR recorded TV, so you have to like manually search through all of their sections. It's very tedious.
Dude, I mean, what is going? That I can't stand that stuff. I mean, I watch Pro Football Talk on Peacock all the time, and like even sometimes people would ask me how to find the Majority Report, and I'm like, not an easy search function on that app.
Like it may be easier on like I use it on like an app on my television, but it might be easier like online or maybe on the browser based one. But who does that?
Yeah. All right, this is going to be the final call of the day because I promised earlier. Okay, Kowalski, why are you calling in and hanging up all the time? I'm literally trying to help you out here.
I can tell you why he's doing that, because he listens when he's on the tractor. He calls in to listen through the phone line.
I was going to make that the final call, and I was going to give you the floor, but unfortunately, Kowalski, you're out today. No more. You're done. Bye-bye.
That's it. Wait. That's how he listens to the show, like purposefully, like over the phone line?
Yeah.
A lot of people do that, apparently.
Wow.
The old days, the MR hotline.
All right. So if you take a call from someone who's just listening, do they ever go like, "Oh no, please hang up. I don't have anything to say. I'm just listening."
Yes, that has happened explicitly.
Wow. I've never been around for that. Amazing.
All right,
It must
this
be a very intimate experience to be like to know you're the only person listening through a phone line. I mean, not only person, but to have a little bit to yourself.
the final call of the day, calling from a 917 number. I believe I know who this is. Who's this?
This is Alex from New York.
Alex from New York. Good to hear from you. You're such a regular Thursday caller. I'm glad that we're getting regular Thursday callers in and of themselves as well.
Yeah, well, I know you're the one who likes the Fight Club the most.
I do.
Yeah, obviously, you're the best. Anyways, two things before. One, as per Tucker Carlson, I know for a fact he has to do all those meetings too, all those HR meetings that he laments, and he usually goes pretty hard on air after those meetings happen. So maybe they happened recently.
Okay.
The other thing, I forgot, so it doesn't matter.
All right.
Anyways, here's the matchup for today. I got Kaylee McEnany. Jen Psaki.
Yeah.
What?
Kaylee.
And Jen Psaki.
Okay.
And Matt Walsh versus Michael Knowles.
Oh, these are both good. Okay, we're gonna hang up on you, Alex, and then we'll answer. All right.
All right. Have a good day.
You too. All right. Kaylee McEnany versus Jen Psaki. I actually think Jen Psaki would win. I think she's got like a little. I think she's Kaylee McEnany seems really tiny, and Jen Psaki's got that like passive aggressive rage that I think could probably come out in some sort of animalistic way.
Well, if factfiles.com is to be believed, Kaylee McEnany has 2 inches on Jen Psaki.
What?
Jen Psaki's 5'5". That is super tough because I think you're right. I think I'd go with Jen Psaki because I think Kaylee McEnany just not a fighter.
She probably eats like one olive a day. I mean,
Right.
I'm sorry. That's rude and offensive. I'm sorry, but
she's
don't call me a female misogynist.
What was the other one? The males?
Michael Knowles versus Matt Walsh.
God,
I think of Walsh just such a fake tough guy, but Knowles is so pathetic too.
Yeah, Knowles is like a failed actor.
I think I'd got to go with Matt Walsh, even though I'm sure
I think Walsh is animated by more like sort of like demons.
Yeah.
Knowles is sort of animated just by like desire to be seen on camera. So I think that's why I would give Walsh the advantage.
What do you guys think?
I was actually just wondering if it'd be illegal to set up like a sports bet type account where you like do these kinds of celebrity deathmatch matchups, and then like charge people like NFT money to like, I don't know, own an NFT of the fight, own an NFT of the bet, anything that could work.
Yeah.
So I was scamming in the back of my head. So maybe take Matt first.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Lek is right about Matt Walsh. Has got some, he's got some demons in his closet there that, I'm not saying he's a good fighter or particularly strong, but he seems like someone who would just be motivated by pure rage and unhappiness with his own life. So he'd probably win there.
Willing to die too.
Yeah. And as for the other one, I'm just too much of a woman respecter.
Nothing to lose. Yeah. Oh, come on.
I just respect women too much. I mean, I know some of the misogynists in this Zoom chat have no problem pontificating on this, but
Psaki has real like Black Friday mom energy over Matt.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm down 100%.
Yeah, I think Psaki would beat the shit out of. Yes.
My maternal instincts are kicking in now, since I'm not a leader, and so I'm going to chastise you all for engaging in such behavior.
Wow. I mean, at least I can run a Fortune 500 company. I don't have those maternal instincts.
I want to bring a Seder deathmatch back. That show was great.
Yeah. All right, let's read like 10 more IMs and then we will get out of here. Prairie Fire Kowalski. Hey, Millennial Majority Report. I'm down by the river and I don't have steady data and the call dropped. Verizon sucks, but it is the local monopoly. So anyway, Emma, who do you think will win the Super Bowl and who would you like to see win it? I will read the rest of it. I'm very, very torn. I'm probably going to end up rooting for the Rams, which I know goes against everything because I love Joe Burrow so much, but Odell is my favorite active player in the league, so it's just hard for me to root against him. I really want to see him get a ring, and vindicated. But I really won't. I'll be happy with either outcome. Either outcome. It's a great, great matchup. Matt, I enjoyed your conversation with Better Matt last night. Mr. Sutton, do you typically wear clothes to blending with your surroundings, or are you just trying not to intimidate others from your sheer size? Also, what message would you give to folks whose New Year's resolution was to get into shape now that we're in February and their motivation is declining? It sounds very theoretical, Kowalski. I don't need motivation since my goal is to be your intellectual and physics equal. Left is poggers. I think he meant physical equal, but yeah.
I think going to the gym or like starting to work out is a very weird goal as a New Year's resolution, not because of like New Year's and, New Year's resolutions not being traditionally kept, which is another problem with them, because it gets cold around New Year's. That's when for a lot of people it's cold. And so like motivating yourself to start going to the gym for the first time when it's like snowing out, or like when, when you get up, it's or rather when you go home from work, it's dark at 5, it's difficult. So I mean, I would say, start slow, develop some good patterns now, and then once things start warming up and you're able to like better find the motivation in the surroundings, definitely kick it into high gear.
I'm like struggling with that, with the morning workouts are tough because I got to get up pretty early, and when it's this dark, and then it's like dark when you're done with the workout, I feel like it's not working that well for me this winter.
The IMR just made me realize, though, I didn't realize that was the couch behind you, Brandon. I just thought you had a very brolic left arm. Those 64-inch pythons right there.
COVID hasn't been kind to me. I've had to like really lighten up my workout and focus on stretching, obviously. So I'm not as big as I used to be. Still quite large, but it's. The Brandon muscle coin stock has taken a little dip.
Left Leckening, Emma, I think you're being a little unfair when you call NFTs a pyramid scheme. There's plenty of evidence that they are instead a decentralized Ponzi scheme. Bernadette, Greta Thunberg is a good person. I honestly think being a good politician shouldn't be measured by how good you are at public speaking. I don't think she's a politician, but your beliefs and integrity are more important. Reasonable people should understand that. Totally agree. H-Dub, although tell that to the people that are, whatever, never mind. H-Dub, Matt's new pod, Scam Economy, is so good. I learned a ton from the first episode. I never thought I'd understand this weird BS, but it was so informative that I get it now. There you go.
Oh, thank you.
Jersey Max, my sarcasm about blaming weed did not come across. Yes, I know it was a joke. Love the show. All right, all good. Will from Indiana, can't believe I was listening to misogynists, both male and female, on MR the whole time. In all seriousness, I understand the political media world in general being very male dominated, and it's generally the case with sports media. That's part of why I don't want to go into that, or I've kind of largely ruled it out because it's like even more misogynistic than this. And on the left, at least, it's like you have good bedfellows, but when you reach outside that sphere, it can get pretty toxic.
Barstool and Clay Travis.
Yeah, I don't need those to be my colleagues. Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, let me tell you, the misogyny on the show, let's put it this way. If this was 2013, 2014 Matt Binder, I would have been debating you, Emma. Let's put it that way, okay?
Okay.
That's when I was debating all those men's rights activists.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to say I don't want to be lumped in with the rest of the misogynists. My muscles are full of respect for women. So, let's put that out there.
Unproblematic king. As someone who is entering the latter field in male sports media, it is something I'm trying to be mindful of and to be very respectful and open to being an ally for women who have to deal with this shit. In my IU sportscasting class, we talked about the verbal and online harassment women in media face and how they're often sexualized and harassed with awful comments from misogynistic trolls, and more than likely will never say that stuff to their face. It sucks because everyone should have the comfort of being in that media field without scrutiny, but it is unfortunately can't be sugarcoated, and it's a reality that I'm sure you're familiar with. Even though there are still great people in the business and people in the audiences who are sympathetic, I just hope it can get so much better. Left is best. I agree. Will from Indiana. It is a huge bummer. Another thing about that space too is like the barstoolification. It's just like every dude talking about some of these sports that have like a lot of black players are just white and fratty, and there's a lot of toxicity in that media sphere, unfortunately.
Let's see how they handle the Flores thing.
Mostly I've seen like nothing on it. honestly, except for the
Not touching that.
Yeah. All right, 5 more. Between the 101 and the 5, Dianetics chapter 3, verse 14, thou shalt make an ape and go forth and multiply, but to each his own ape. I like the Scientology reference there. Really cool. I'm all woman, baby, despite never breeding, plus a bit of unwanted facial hair. Jay Tingle, Fallon looks like he's in pain, so at least there's that.
Well, yeah, Jason Miles of This Is Revolution was DMing me, and he said, reminded us that, a lot of those segments are, of course, paid for advertisements. And of course, that's what was going on there. And that's why you can hear Jimmy Fallon's soul escaping a little bit more than usual as he talks about, hey, you turned me onto this. We're part of the same community now. Like, oh.
He's one of those guys, though. I remember when Russell Wilson, I think it was his show, Russell Wilson, NFL quarterback, went on his show and was like, and Jimmy Fallon goes, it was right when he was about to get a second contract or another contract. And Jimmy Fallon was like, everyone's saying you're about to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. And no one was saying that. It's just like, okay, your agent gave him that and he's saying this to get people talking about that. Jimmy Fallon is the shill of all shills in that late night sphere, 100%.
And I mean, I think, if the guy who was in Taxi with Queen Latifah is embarrassed by your product, you should probably rethink it.
I liked that movie growing up.
I just watched it recently. It's pretty all right, but not because of Jimmy Fallon.
I also remember him in Fever Pitch, right? That was him? Yeah.
Nope. I've never been a Fallon fan, so couldn't even tell you what he was in. I just know he was on SNL for a while, and he would often ruin the jokes because he couldn't help himself but crack.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure comedians hate that. Or like sketch people, but anyway.
I think it's cute when like someone who like never breaks like that adds to it the moment, but when you're constantly doing it, like then yeah.
All right, 3 more. Chargund, is the increase in type 1, type 2 diabetes related specifically to COVID, or is it too much couch being inactive / too much sugar in the food thing? I have type 1 diabetes, so I promise I'm not trying to be disrespectful. Thanks. You can look it up. There's a Times article about kids, and they are believing that it could have to do with COVID. So I don't know.
I mean, I would just also say the people who are like trouting out that like America's high death rate is due to our unhealthy population. Most of those people in the media or in like politics don't really want to change that. They don't want to give you extra time to work out by like reducing work hours or make publicly accessible gym equipment, areas. They just want to like use your own personal choice against you to say like that's why they shouldn't be forced to provide you with any health care. Even though, no offense, there are people in every country who are overweight or who have like other forms of mobility issues that are keep them from working out properly, and they didn't have the same level of like death.
They were making fun of the whole silly but like I guess vaguely well-intentioned Michelle Obama campaign on that.
Oh, they hated that. They hated that, but it's I think because of all the bad faith in the media, it's just become readily acceptable to allow Republicans to complain about things that they don't even believe in a way that's supposed to like check the left or check liberals and make them like it's like, okay, but I know you don't care about that. Like it's just obvious.
2 more. Matt for president. Love you all. Just curious on how you collect the clips you react to. I feel bad for Matt and feel for his mental health because he has to listen and watch nut jobs, racist and dumb doors for hours each day. I would say that's more Bradley's job. So feel badly for Bradley a little bit.
I mean, basically scrolling Twitter and when you see a video that's offensive, you like it and put it in the Slack.
Yep. And the final I am of the day, guerrilla business. Emma, Brandon, and Matt, any advice on abolishing white supremacist gangs embedded within my local sheriff's department? Don't mean to spam. I really do not have advice for that, but I mean, shine a light on it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think light is the only. I don't know how else you do. You have a frontal assault of those guys now at this point. Like, it's a thing where like there's proper newspaper articles about it. Share those with people. Make sure everyone knows about it. But like that's an entrenched problem that's going to take actually having power over those folks to deal with.
All right. Yeah. Awesome stuff, guys. Check out Scam Economy. Check out, of course, check out Left Reckoning from last night, too. Yes.
Yep. Tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, youtube.com/Matt Binder and scameconomy.com. Thank you, Emma.
Of course. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We will see you tomorrow for Casual Friday, and then the rest of the Thursday crew next Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in.